Copyright notice. Favorite sin. Copyright by Victoria Pinder. This book is a work of fiction. The names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events, business establishments, locales, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without the prior written permission of the copyright owner. Chapter 1. Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The minister asked as they stood in the hotel ballroom turned wedding ceremony. Calliope Campbell swallowed as a cold shiver raced down her spine. The answer no was on the tip of her tongue. She batted her fake eyelashes at her about-to-be husband as her Vera Wang wedding dress stifled her waist and made it hard to breathe. If she said yes, then she'd be his wife, forever. 10 years of dating shouldn't make this a hard choice. Perspiration broke out on her spine as she stared at Chris Sommers, her soon-to-be husband. Rocks formed in her stomach. The air around her felt like it circled her throat and wanted to strangle her. Everyone stared at her. Despite the knot that grew in her throat, she answered, "I will." The world spun around her. Why had she said that? Running down the aisle like a crazy woman only happened in the movies. The minister seemed to not see how she shivered because he went on. Is there anyone here who has just cause why these two should not be wed? Let them speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence surrounded her and it felt like she'd choke. The door rattled. She turned her head and dropped her hands from Chris's as the hotel ballroom doors flew open. Footsteps clanked on the floor, and Calliope's gaze shifted to the brown-eyed woman who boldly walked down the aisle as her hands crossed her waist. Chris's face went white as the dark-haired woman their age approached. The queasiness in Calliope's stomach came from believing this was proof that Chris wasn't faithful. Part of her had guessed, but she lost the ability to breathe the second Chris said, "Roxanne, Roxy." So this was she, clearly, and she wasn't his secretary. Not with that body, not with Chris. This was it. Everything she'd thought was now proven. The past 10 years of their relationship was not enough. Calliope clutched her bouquet of pink peonies that rattled in her hand as Roxanne said, "Christopher, I'm pregnant. Don't do this. I love you." Calliope stepped away from Chris, just a fraction. For months she'd been drifting from him that now she felt there was a gorge between them, a black pit that made her realize she was saved. "What is he to you?" Chris turned toward her and said, "Callie, Roxanne is the woman I slept with." Another step backward. The ballroom felt huge and looming all around her. Why had she said yes? When the minister asked, she should have said no. She glanced into the crowd of friends and family. Everyone stared at her with eyes wide, filled with horror or compassion. She stood another step away from the man she was not about to marry. The aisle seemed a mile long as her heart began to race. Her hands balled into fists around the flowers, and she heard the stems crack. I knew something was up. Calliope took yet another step to leave, and the space between them wasn't nearly big enough to be a rift. I should have said no. Wait? Chris put his hand on her shoulder. No. Marriage was supposed to be forever. Her parents had died together, and their bodies were found holding each other's hand. No. Love and a commitment meant this never should have happened. All those late nights he'd never worked in his life, and how her text messages had gone unanswered. Everything now made sense. She shook his hand off and stepped off the altar in her blue Prada strappy heels. She made it to the first row of guests. Her mind went blank as she caught a whiff of cedarwood in the air that gave her a sense of calm. Chris called out behind her and her peace to breathe was lost. "Wait, Calliope, can we talk?" "No, you love her. There is nothing else to say." She turned and pointed toward the dark-haired beauty whose hair practically radiated with bounce and texture from what must be a pregnancy glow. This was too much. Her neck heated as she thought about the years poured into this man who brought her to this hotel overlooking the Mexican Riviera and betrayed her. She batted away tears from her eyes and waited. It was stupid, but here she was. What could Chris possibly say now? This was why he insisted they leave for a vacation destination wedding when she had wanted to stay in Miami. Please, talk to me. Chris sounded like a boy and not a man. In school, they had started and shared good times, and the boy voice plucked at her heartstrings. Her face fell as she dropped her shoulders. Maybe there wasn't a valid reason for Roxanne interrupting her wedding. A baby could be lied about, but she doubted the crazy thought. This was reality. Her heart felt like crying, which would lead to her own tears. Darn! Her face felt slightly wet, and she shouldn't have doubted her own ears. She clutched the flowers as a shield and turned into the crowd. The gasps echoed in her ears. 1 minute and one only. Meet me in the bridal suite, alone. Her gaze fell on her brother, and she silently pleaded with him to watch the door for her escape. Then she walked away from the altar, from the man she'd pinned her dreams on, from her future as Mrs. Sommers. Everyone in the audience whispered, but none of them mattered. Her fiancé cheated on her, yet he'd brought her to this destination venue to marry her. The Mexican beach outside the bay windows on her right showed the sun was about to set for the evening reception. The red and yellow hues were supposed to make the cake cutting and first dance a magical moment. None of that mattered now. In a perfect world, this was to be the moment her happy ever after started. Instead, she passed the blurry faces of guests and finally closed the door to the ballroom. Outside, the waitstaff shuffled as they turned to stare at her. Her face was hot. She gazed into the red-carpeted hallway with the crystal chandelier at the place where her guests were to get a small appetizer while the hotel staff transformed the ballroom into the reception. The guests could enjoy the food without her. She picked up her dress and ran to the room that she'd used all day to get dressed. It was too bad she was stuck. An airplane out would be impossible, but there was no way she should wake up and face anyone. She refused to cry or do anything that would make her look even more foolish than agreeing to the wedding in the first place. Why had she said yes and let everyone see that? Her head pounded with the question as she made her way to the other end of the ballroom and slipped open the side door. The bridal suite still had her makeup and her clothes tossed around on the seats. She rushed inside and bolted the door behind her. Then she slammed her fists along with the flowers on the vanity next to her. The makeup tray shook a little. She shut her eyes and repeated out loud, "Today is a wonderful day." The quietness of the room that once buzzed with excited guests, like her college roommates Tracy and Sharon, now echoed with stillness. The door rattled. It must be Chris. The appointed moment was seconds away. A baby was proof that he'd cheated on her and she was done. She checked her face in the mirror and blotted her eyes to stop the tears. Again, she said, "Today is a wonderful day." Lying to herself was clearly how she operated. A smile that might hide how she felt appeared in the mirror before her. Finally, she pushed her shoulders straight, opened the door, and the room filled with that moldy spice that Chris always wore. She backed away as she stared at him. Without one sorry, he closed the door. The wedding dress made her feel weak. She hugged her waist, not caring that she bunched the white satin as she said, "Chris, Roxy is having your baby. I don't care. I love you." No, marriage for her was one man and one woman. If she had to die, like her mom and dad, she wanted to hold hands with someone who loved only her. Her pulse raced. This was wrong. Her hands curled into those fists again as she wobbled on her too high for her shoes. "You love me too? Are you serious?" "Calliope, we've been on and off since middle school." If counting middle school, they'd been together for 15 years, more than half of her life. She closed her eyes to think. Yes, it was the reason she said yes, but not a reason now. The line of argument worked only if there wasn't another woman. She lifted her chin as she opened her gaze and flatly said, "None of that matters anymore. We're not children. We never dated other people." Ridiculous. Giving Chris a chance to talk was a mistake. She paced and gazed at the door. She should have stood closer to it so she could have stormed out. Mistakes were the order of her life, it seemed. This was enough. She pointed at him as her voice grew louder. You dated 2 other women when we weren't together. But when I took you back the last time you swore you only loved me, neither of them meant anything. I meant everything I said then. Seriously? Without thinking, she picked up her bouquet and threw it at his face. Naturally, she missed as it hit the opposite wall of her target and landed precariously on a planter stand, but the confusion helped her storm closer to the door. So you don't get to continue dating if we're engaged. That's not how this works. You've always grounded me and kept me together. Grounded. The bouquet toppled off the table and onto the floor. The flowers were dead, much like how she felt about Chris. This wasn't enough. The heat of Cozumel was hotter than Miami, and right now that fueled her. Her fisted hand covered her lips and nose as she stared at him. This is my fault. We never should have come here. Calliope, I want to marry you. Lies. Love meant giving up all others and being with just her for the rest of their lives. She knew better. The last year had been a mistake. Last summer, she should have said no. This wasn't her fairy tale. She'd probably never get one. She shook her head. What about Roxanne? I don't know. More minutes had passed in silence. Her face was dry now. Chris had nothing else to say. Someone knocked on the door and her brother called in. Are you okay, Calliope? I'm coming out in 1 minute. At least her brother had come to this farce of her life. It was the one good thing that happened this week. She massaged her temples and then tugged the diamond off her hand. You don't get that chance anymore. Chris, I'm done. His eyes widened in shock. What do you mean, done? Take your ring. She wiggled it in front of his face and he didn't move. She reached out, took his hand and dropped the ring in his palm. In that second, she felt lighter, like she was free. It was strange. She turned and realized there really was nothing else to say. She turned toward the door and then froze. She'd never been alone and had no idea how to exist outside of a relationship. This was the part of every movie where the heroine went on some major vacation and somehow met the love of her life. But the only vacation she had was this Mexican trip where she'd invited everyone she knew for the wedding. None of this mattered in the moment. She swung open the door and glanced into the clear blue eyes of Michael Marshall, standing behind her brother Brandon. Her fingers wrapped around the doorknob as Chris called from behind. Don't, no. For the last time, she turned her head. Her stomach churned. Why was she here? As she stared at Chris, she felt nothing but a sense of waste. There was no return. All the tears she'd shed from the moments he left her were her own stupidity. They'd been on again, off again so many times she could almost count on it like a national holiday. Chris, go and be with your Roxanne or Jennifer or Maria or go off by yourself. Her brother's knuckles cracked and the sound caught her attention. Calliope, you're my heart. Please forgive me. Then she stared for a second at Michael, standing shoulder to shoulder with her brother. Fists clenched, wearing a grim expression. Her face felt hot. If only she hadn't ditched Michael on their first almost date to return to Chris. The past few months where she spent wondering what it would be like if she'd chose Michael that night played on her nerves. Now he saw her like this. She turned toward Chris again and a calmness returned. Things like this can't be fixed with broad, sweeping statements. As she closed the door behind her, she picked up the hem of her stupid white dress that she never should have put on. Brandon placed his hand on Michael's arm. Can you get her out of the hotel? Michael's cedar scent sent a hunger through her that she didn't recognize. She ignored the feeling as she said, I don't want to stay in this hotel tonight. Brandon, where should we go? Brandon nodded at her. Michael isn't at this hotel. We booked you a room at his so you don't have to run into all the guests. Perfect. While it wasn't her college friends, Tracy and Sharon, Michael let her feel as peaceful and calm as possible while the world crashed at her feet. For right now, she'd ignore his bad boy reputation that under normal circumstances her brother would have disapproved of. Brandon pointed them away, and she walked with Michael toward the main lobby. He raised his eyebrow. "Where are you going?" "The door is over there. I need my bag. My life is in the honeymoon suite." "Fair enough." He watched Brandon go into the room with Chris. "Let's get your bag so we can get you out of here." Her brother's heavy energy pierced the air as the door to the bridal suite slammed with the two men inside as they walked through the waiting area and toward the main lobby. Seconds later, they were near other hotel guests and made their way toward bank of elevators that took guests to their rooms. Neither of them said anything as they waited, and finally elevator door opened in front of them. As she stepped in, Michael moved near the closing doors. "Okay, if you need to pack your bag, I'll make sure Chris doesn't come in and bother you." "You are a true godsend, Michael." She leaned against the mirrored window in the gold-painted elevator. In this small space, she realized that his cedar scent reminded her of a log cabin in the woods with a fire roasting as she came into the room where her parents were laughing. The memory of childhood hit her hard and fast. If she had a mother still, she might not have gotten to Mexico, let alone the altar. Michael winked at her. "No one calls me that." What had she said? She was so lost in her thoughts. Then she remembered she'd called him a godsend. As the door opened and the bell dinged, she let her shoulders relax. They walked into the hall, and she told him, "Just don't leave me here." Eventually, she made it to the honeymoon suite and fished out her room key from her dress. At least her bag wasn't completely unpacked. The faster she got out of here and away from Chris and her almost mistake, the better. Tonight, she escaped with the baddest boy she ever knew, who had filled her fantasy world for years now, and who might just be exactly what she needed. It was time. Chapter 2. Calliope's face began to regain color as she packed her belongings from the honeymoon suite. Michael leaned against the wall near the door because she waved him off every time he came too close. So he watched for the moment when he might help her again. Last year, he hadn't made himself 100% clear that he was interested in her, and in his hesitation, Chris had found them near the bar while they waited for their table and begged Calliope for another shot. In that moment, he had regretted not telling her that he was interested, and he still remembered the smirk on Chris's face as they had left together. This time, he had his life more together, had started his own company, and now he'd ensure Calliope knew he wanted her too. Voices echoed in the hallway. He stood taller and saw how she zipped the bag with aggression as he said, "Are you ready?" "Almost. I want to change." She straightened her spine and turned toward the bathroom. He stepped closer, and the smell of peonies wafted to him from the decorations in this room. "I hear people nearby. Can you change when we get to the hotel?" She wrinkled her nose as she picked up the fabric of her form-fitting gown, but then she shrugged and followed him to the door. He picked up her bag and led her to the elevator. As he pushed the button, she asked, "What hotel are we going to?" The doors closed and they were alone. "Good." He pressed the L for lobby. "I booked us at the Hotel Esencia in Playa del Carmen." Her eyes widened as they descended. "Us? I thought you had a room at the hotel already." The elevator dinged and the doors opened. He placed his hand on her spine and felt a flood of warmth. He'd keep her safe, just as he promised her brother. He craned his neck to scan the main room that buzzed with activity, but he didn't see any wedding guests. He took her hand and a pulse raced through him that was hard to ignore. He guided her toward the glass doors while holding her bag in his other. "I came to your wedding on a cruise ship, actually." When the doors opened, she stopped and her lips parted. He motioned for the bellhop to get them a cab with a wave of his hand. The man nodded while she said, "Why did you come to this mess?" "I know I invited you, but the last time we saw each other, you helped Chris find me." His lips curled as the valet waved them toward a cab. "I never helped Chris. He said you did." Michael took her hand again, and that spark he felt hit him hard. Calliope was the closest thing to the one that got away in his life, and he'd not let that happen again. Somehow, he'd allied himself with her brother to protect her today, and he'd succeed. She even looked gorgeous wearing the dress she'd planned to marry someone else in. He led her into the cab, pushed some of the white fabric off the seat, and joined her. He told the cab driver the port and then answered Calliope. I made the mistake of telling him we had a date. Again, her eyes widened as the cab weaved through traffic. So it was a date to you? I wasn't sure. It most definitely was. She fell into him from a sharp turn the driver made. The sunset made the streets almost glow in a red and yellow color, as the blue water next to the road gave him a clear view of the cruise ship that had brought him here. Tonight, his sister and her friends would continue home while he stayed behind to torture himself or to get Calliope out of his head. You wish I had known how you felt, she swallowed. I'm surprised you came then. I needed to see this. He wouldn't be anywhere else. If she married Chris Sommers, he needed to see it firsthand. Last year, he'd realized how much he despised the guy when he'd come back for Calliope hours after he had just left another woman's bed. He had bragged about his adventure at the gym, which was why Michael had quit that gym. Calliope had always struck him as sweet, like a candy cane that only came out once a year. The cab driver pulled into the port and jerked the car to a stop. He glanced over his shoulder with a sheepish grin and said, I thought you might want to be alone as quickly as possible, and look hard at her gown. She opened her mouth to say something but stopped. She had no idea what to say. Michael paid the driver and helped her out. People stared at her white dress while they made her way out of the car. He picked up the bag from the trunk that the driver handed them and then wrapped his free hand around her. I never gave you another option and stayed silent when I should have told you that I had wanted you as more than a friend. She stopped and let his hand drop as she said, Oh, relax. Pressure wasn't good. He could wait for her as he'd waited over a year already. It was 6 months ago. Right. The air horn of the ship echoed through the crowded dock. Passengers flocked to gain entrance to the ferry and showed their passport before they gained access and stepped onto the dock. It was time to go if they were make it to the mainland in time. He held out his palm. I promised your brother I'd keep you safe and out of sight. The ship's waiting for everyone to board. She took his hand again, and they both walked swiftly to the ship. Wait, what? As he handed his credit card to a ticket seller, he told Calliope his plan. Tomorrow, your brother will come and check on you. No. She stepped into the wall of the shack that sold cheap souvenirs to foreigners and stepped forward again. He signed the slip the cashier pushed at him and then took the 2 tickets. What's wrong? He readjusted her bag and placed his free hand on her shoulder to lead her toward the ship. She fell into step as they cleared their way through a small maze to board. I will see my brother when I'm ready. Tomorrow is too soon. He promised Brandon. Michael normally never promised anyone anything, but his had hands itched to be near Calliope again, and he had shaken his hand. This time, he'd honor the promise. He cares about you, I get that. He's all I have, just like you and your sister now, I think. The second he handed the tickets to the person on the ship, they zigzagged their way through the crowd that already took their seats to find a corner of their own. A nice family moved closer together and gave them room to sit. Calliope sat down and ignored all the stares they received. He should have let her change, but every footstep outside the hotel lobby reminded him. Yes, my sister is on the cruise. She just agreed to marry Wyatt Colburn. A huge grin grew on her face as she clearly remembered Belle and Wyatt. Ah, they went to prom together. That's so exciting. I knew they liked each other. His gaze narrowed as the ship left the dock. At least Chris hadn't followed them. They were alone. He followed Calliope's clues about ignoring the crowd and relaxed his shoulders. How? Weren't you the prom queen about to marry her king there? She looked down and closed her eyes for a moment. Don't remind me. Sometimes the past needs to stay there. I never should have said yes. He placed his hand on her knee and waited for her to look at him as the ocean between them and land grew wider apart. Why did you? She wrinkled her chin, but she held a smile while she spoke the words, as if it was fresh lemon juice she had in her mouth. I want a home. Chris was all I knew, and I was afraid of taking chances. Seriously, I knew we shouldn't have come here, but I kept talking myself out of listening to my heart. She was deeper than most women he ever met. Instinctually, his hand went to her face to find out if she was that soft, everywhere, and to offer a hug. She leaned closer and pressed her cheek to his shoulder as he stroked her hair. "You have nothing to be afraid of." With the ocean in his view, and Calliope in his arms, he had everything he ever wanted. Neither said anything else while they sat, and no one spoke to them. The ship docked in the mainland and passengers passed them. At first, neither moved, but as the crowd thinned out, he stood and offered his hand. She gripped it and stood as she picked up the edges of her white dress that showed black smudges. As they walked and deboarded the ship, she pushed flyaway strands of her hair that used to be perfectly coiffed off her face. While both of them let their feet press against the small gangway and touched ground, she turned and he had full view of her radiant face in the pale moonlight. Calliope said, "You don't have to stay with me. I know you have a life, and I thought you were dating Eva Bishop now." Eva and dating were never words he put together. Yes, he had slept with her, more than once, but it was like two ships that passed in the night. It hadn't been romantic, and it was a while ago. Eva never once made his pulse react. "No, we're better off as friends. I have no strings." "Good." She nodded as they walked over to the rental car station. She stayed quiet after that while he handed over his card and stared at her. She swayed to the sound of mariachi band that played in the distance. Right now, if Roxanne hadn't interrupted, she'd be dancing with her new husband. But thankfully she wasn't. She was here, with him. A few minutes later, Michael had the keys to a car and walked back to join her. While he placed her bag in the trunk, without a word, Calliope reached in her bag and retrieved a pair of shorts and a sleeveless red shirt. She held them close as she turned around. "Please unzip me." Michael slammed the trunk door and reached for her. Her skin was like soft, whipped cream that was moisturized in places he never thought possible as he kept Calliope close to him so no one saw and unzipped the dainty zipper. Once done, he held it together as he helped her to the passenger seat. In silence, she followed and slipped into the car as he stood outside the window. A few minutes later, Calliope knocked on the door and Michael turned around. She was now in a red cotton blouse and khaki shorts, and the dress was carelessly tossed in the back seat. He came around to the driver's side, hopped in, and started the car. Once they made it onto the highway that would bring them to the hotel, Calliope flipped on the radio, but after a while, all they heard was white noise. He reached out, brushed his hand against hers as he turned it off, and asked, "What did you mean when you said good to me not dating Eva?" Her face flushed and she lowered her lashes. She sucked in her lips and then released them. Finally, she asked, "Why does that matter?" The hotel sign appeared on the highway. They were close. He gripped the wheel. "It mattered to me. I thought for sure how fast you both started meant that you never thought about that night Chris interrupted us. As I said, Eva is a friend, but nothing more." Next to a gas station, he had to do a U-turn to get onto the hotel property. As he turned the car on the empty road, she said, "After I left you on the date, I refused to sleep with Chris this entire year. Tonight He pressed on the gas and almost missed the next turn into the hotel. His heart rate increased, but then he interrupted and slowed the car. "It's okay, Calliope. You don't need to explain." Finally, he turned the car onto the driveway, and they both stared at the Mediterranean-style hotel with white umbrellas littering the beach behind it. She said, "I'm not explaining. I am asking you. Will you have sex with me tonight?" "What?" No other words surfaced. Nothing else could be said. Calliope was the one who featured in his nightly what-if fantasy. He parked the car near the front as he shook his head. "We both know you have not wanted to settle on any woman, ever, and I want to forget today." He'd promised her brother. His own face felt hot. "I'm not a marrying man, Calliope. I'm not asking for another wedding today. I want to forget all about the last one. I don't think." She shrugged as the valet approached the car. She held the door as she said, "Guess I'll have to find some nameless guy at the hotel then." Without another word, she practically jumped out of her seat and took a step toward the hotel. His heart beat fast again. This time he hopped out and grabbed her bag from the valet. Once he had everything, he met her at the door and said, "No." You are not shopping for a random guy tonight." She licked her lips as the air conditioner hit his skin. It should have cooled him down. Instead, he stayed hotter than he imagined he would. "Michael, I know what I need and I want to feel you inside me, but since you said no, I didn't say no." This was his one chance. Brandon's grim face and the promise he'd made a few hours ago to watch out for Calliope and get her out of there had not meant sleep with her. Then again, it was what anyone should have expected from him until this past year, and very much in character. As he stared into Calliope's blue eyes, his body pulsed again. Tonight he could have her. As they neared the lobby for check-in, she asked, "So you will? Reservation for Marshall." He placed his hand on her spine and spoke to the hotel clerk. "We'll just need one room." A smile grew on her face as she stepped closer to him. She smelled so good, like those peonies she put everywhere. His lips ached to taste her. The clerk gave him both plastic room swipe keys. The pool villa. Good. He led her onto the outskirts of the hotel and walked toward the pool. Once they were alone behind palm trees that overlooked a private pool and beach, he turned and placed both hands on the walls around her as he lowered his lips to meet hers. "I will rock your world tonight. You'll never want to leave." Her lips curled into a smile. "Good. I've been boring and predictable till now. Now I want you." Then his mouth met hers to taste the closest thing to heaven he ever experienced. Chapter 3. Michael's kiss tasted like spice and headiness and life itself. Calliope clung to him and let herself not think about anything other than how she could have had these kind of kisses months ago. His lips felt like they branded her as his property, and for tonight, right now, she wanted nothing else. "This way." He broke their kiss and then guided her to lead her into the pool villa. Breathless, Calliope followed him and let him take her hand. As he opened the brightly lit house that he rented for them, she realized just how extravagant this place was. The white cushioned sitting room had windows everywhere. She stuck her head into the bathroom, and the pure white bathtub overlooked palm trees and a fountain. She could only imagine the bedrooms, but she spied private terraces on the other end of the house. Chris would never have bothered getting this for her, and would have said run-of-the-mill is fine if asked if he wanted to upgrade. "Why did you get the villa? You should be in a place worthy of you." He dropped her bag into a bedroom. This was it. If she wanted Michael, then Calliope had to be bolder, and she'd wondered for a year if she should have stayed at dinner and not gone back to Chris. Now she'd find out what she missed. Every night since that night, she had wondered. Years before that, she had held a slight torch for Michael, though he never blinked in her direction, romantically. Instead, he slept with everyone older than her in school, and his reputation had only grown since. She followed him into the bedroom, where her gaze landed on the canopy bed with white see-through fabric that laced the bed. She'd never even touched a princess bed since she was 6 and her parents were still alive. None of that. She kicked off her shoes and stared hard at his muscular frame. Her fingers traced her neck and her breastbone as she asked, "What?" Michael leaned against the frame of the bed and unbuttoned his white shirt. She felt adrenaline grow inside her as she saw every muscle he revealed. His every move hypnotized her, and then he wiggled his finger at her. "Come here, I want to see all of you." Good, this was what they both wanted. She licked her lips as she went to stand in front of him. With wide eyes, she never blinked. "What should we do? Let's start with that shirt," he said as his hands landed on her hips. Her heart pounded. Every inch of skin he revealed as he tugged her shirt over her head felt as if he claimed her when he had hardly touched her yet. She lowered her lashes and her face felt flushed. Finally, she was his, just as she had dreamed. "Michael, I'm nervous." "We don't have to." He let her go and her eyes met his. "I'll let you take the master bedroom and lock me out." No. She wanted him. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Wait. I didn't say no. I've never been with anyone but Chris." He straightened and used his nose to point to the door. Then he walked away and she stared hard at his perfect muscles and backside. Get going and lock that door so I'm not tempted. No. Tonight was happening. Instead of moving, she tugged off her shirt. This was her one chance to taste what she never dreamed she'd have, him. Her heart raced so fast, she thought she'd lose the ability to speak. By the door, his eyes widened when he turned toward her again. What? He rubbed his jaw and stared at her bra as he said, Calliope, you're killing me. This was the guy who wasn't supposed to care and knew how to please a woman. All her life she'd heard whispered that Michael was the bad boy to avoid. But he knew how to please. High school and college were long gone, but she'd been stupid about loyalty and faithfulness. Now it was time to know how living for herself felt. She unzipped her shorts and let them fall to the floor as she stood in her underwear and leaned on the bedpost because her knees wobbled. Michael Marshall, you promised to rock my world. So where do you want me? He practically flew to her side and tugged on the curve of her hips to let her feel his body on her. Callie, you don't need to prove anything. Michael, it's not a big deal. You push it into the hole and that's that. She tugged his shirt off. Tonight was the night. For years with Chris, she had closed her eyes and wished it was Michael. Now she'd know how she'd feel in his arms. She threw his shirt onto the floor and then reached for his pants. I push. He placed his hands on hers and she melted as he caressed her body. Chris clearly treated you wrong. Chris had never massaged her skin as a warm-up. Michael was exactly what she needed. Good. Tomorrow she'd convince herself she could forget her fantasy. She kissed his neck, and the saltiness mixed with cedar and adrenaline was heady. Yes, you saw what happened today. He turned her toward the bed. She lowered herself onto the mattress but tugged Michael's blue pants. He dropped them and rest of their clothes on the ground. Then he joined her on the bed as he rolled off her underwear and his fingers massaged her apex. As he explored, her body became warmer and her head fell backward. To help, she unhooked her bra and flung it over him. Then he found some secret part of her that made her forget, except that he asked, "How does that feel?" No talking as it held her onto reality and she was so close to the precipice of desire. He moved around and she realized he'd taken off his underwear. A second later, he was half lying on her. His weight against her lower half made her ache for more while he pushed a second finger inside her. Then if I do this? What? Her fiancé had expected her to give herself to him whenever he was in the mood, but he never took the time to spark this wonder. She blinked and stared at the blonde-haired, blue-eyed man that expertly handled her. Michael definitely was living up to his reputation and her imagination. That's nice. I'm never nice. He playfully opened her legs wider and used his thumb on her nether regions. She gasped. Here, do you like this better? Her eyelashes drifted closed. Open your eyes. She followed directions. She couldn't do more than sigh at first as he continued to play her body like a maestro with his violin. Why? A small grin broke out on his face as he winked. I want you to see me as I enter you. Then while she held her breath, she felt taken and welcoming to have him inside her. All she could see were stars as he continued to have total control over her. This must be what heaven was like. Michael was everything she ever dreamed about for this moment. This is just the beginning. He set the pace. Tonight, definitely. Tomorrow no longer mattered. This was how it felt to be a woman. Chapter 4. Your phone is ringing. Calliope's head spun and her eyes burned from the brightness the moment she opened them. She closed her eyes to block out the sun from the window, but the sensation collided with her brain. Instead, she turned and smelled the cedar scent of Michael, who laid beside her. Huh? He covered his eyes and sat up. Then he pointed with his nose. Your phone is in your bag? No, she shouldn't get it. Her brother would have too much to say. She took one more whiff of her lover as the noise of the ringing ruined her ease and she threw off the blankets. Her feet touched the chilled wooden floor which numbed the soles. The air conditioner must have been on full blast. She fumbled through her bag, found her phone and her silk robe. She quickly threw it on and glided toward the balcony and slipped outside to stare at the red morning sun and the blue waters of the Mexican Riviera. The humidity of the morning air warmed her fast as she answered, "Hello, Brandon." Without even a greeting, he said, "I'm coming to get you." She glanced into the bedroom window and the nakedness of Michael's sexy backside as he threw the sheets aside to make the bed. Another few rounds with Michael inside her would make her forget her past. The dream world where she was his tempted her to live in this fantasy and not just imagine Michael anymore. Somehow that bad boy was hers for a few days and this wasn't going to end. She shook her head and turned toward the beach again. "No, I'm fine here. I shouldn't have sent you off with Michael Marshall last night, sis." The last person in the world to talk about dating the wrong person was her brother. She had met some of the most interesting characters that seemed more comical or dramatic or just strange, who were his dates throughout the years. Her brother had claimed he was testing what was out there, which was the opposite of her. Michael Marshall's reputation was even worse, but the whispered rumors she'd heard had all been true. Last night was an appetizer, and she wanted another sample before she had to return to real life. She shook her head and stared down the beach at a couple who had their daughter in the middle as they walked as a family. One day she'd find her own family, but that wasn't now. "He's been good to me. I want to stay here a few days. Go back to Miami as planned. I know you have that movie deal that's stressing you out." Funding the movie with the controversy has been easy, and that book sold millions. The director is fine, and Matthew Morgan is set to star. It's finding the lead actress and the villain. Yes, Brandon's life was his own. He was her only family now, but he had worked out what his dreams were and went after it. She'd not have him bust into her train wreck and potentially mess up his biggest deal to date. Michael was better than she wished. She hugged her waist and heard Michael walk through the small house they occupied. "I know, you saved me already. I don't need you now. Be careful near Michael. He doesn't do relationships and you've dreamed about one all your life. Relax." Her lips parted. She had also dreamed about Michael as the guy who would be hers, even back in high school. But she had kept her mouth shut then. There was no way through their chat she'd let her brother know that, or that she was naked under her robe. I'm your brother. Don't lie." "Fine." A light music came from the house. Michael must be doing something. She turned her head, stared at the beach, and lowered her eyes. Michael didn't need to hear her as she placed her hand on her heart. "I promise not to fall in love and want to marry Michael Marshall." Good. Her heart beat faster. Love was in the cards for all of them, if they wanted. Calliope, Brandon, Michael, and everyone deserved a happily ever after. In her last moments of life, she too wanted to say "I love you" to her husband. Brandon must want that too one day. She twirled and stared through the open glass to see inside as she said, "Brandon? Yeah? Happy ever after must start with finding the people would make her life happy." The same would be true for her brother. "Take it easy. I know producing movies was the hobby that brought you joy, but lately you've been unhappy." "I'm bored, sis. There is a difference. Look, are you sure I can't convince you to return to Miami with me? I promise Chris won't bother you." "Chris?" Her body stiffened as she waited for a more visceral response from the sound of his name. Nothing came. She was quiet. Brandon and his future mattered far more at the moment. She narrowed her eyes. "Why, what did you do?" "Nothing that any other brother wouldn't do." No answer on what he'd done to Chris. As long as he hadn't ruined his own future over her stupid mistakes, then they were fine. She stilled. "Evading my question." "Absolutely just as you are with me. True." Michael's deep voice echoed in the house. Who would he talk to here? She adjusted her robe tie. "I'll be fine. I'm booking myself a massage and I want to walk the beach." "Fine. Just remember you are not alone in the world. You have me." "Likewise, Brandon." The Campbell family might be small in number, but they were still strong. Good luck with finding the actress you need. She hung up the phone. At least her brother wasn't going to show up and do anything. Life was peaceful here. As she stepped into the air-conditioned house, goosebumps grew on her arms. She followed the light flow of music that wafted down the hall and turned into the open kitchen next to the small living area. She leaned against a white post and stared at the plates of eggs, hashed browns, toast, cheese, walnuts, orange juice, and coffee cups on the table. Her eyebrows widened. "What are you doing?" "Making us breakfast." He picked up a coffee press and brought it to the table. He stood in cotton pajama bottoms. She tugged her robe around her chest and then took a step closer to the breakfast nook. "Where did you get the eggs?" Then she caught sight of the white trays on the counter. "Caught!" He placed his hand on her spine and led her to breakfast. Embers of desire from last night rose in her, though she didn't say anything. She listened to her heart as he said, "Room service just stopped with breakfast and a few clothes for myself." That explained the pants. She blinked. "Right, you never had a bag yesterday." He shrugged as he pulled out her chair for her to sit. Once she did, he settled her in and took the seat beside her. "I can get whatever I need delivered." Before he had the chance, she reached out and took the coffee press to pour them glasses. "Who will get your things you left on the ship?" As he took the glass from her hands, he said, "My sister or the crews will hand over my belongings to a charity somewhere. Doesn't matter, really." "That seems wasteful." Her face flushed and she looked away. Chris would have spent hours on the phone with the cruise line for his bags. Not that it should matter anymore. She should no longer be expected to agree with Chris on anything, and they were Michael's bags. He shrugged as he scooped the jam onto his bread. "Many would say that is my entire life." Doubtful. Michael Marshall added walnuts on top of his bread. He dug in, and the joy in his eyes from that bite wasn't hidden. She buttered her slice, but somehow didn't believe that she'd be half as excited about toast as he was. She ignored the thought and focused. "Aren't you running your father's company and making more money than he ever did at it?" He stopped moving with his bread and arm near his face. "How do you? Good." She crossed her legs and stirred her coffee. He took another bite of his breakfast. Then she answered with her eyelashes lowered. "I read up on you. They are calling you Michael Marshall, the new Whiz of Wall Street." He finished his toast and folded his hands in front of his face. "I've always been good at poker and reading people." This, she believed. She finished her plain toast and wondered what life would be like if she lived more like Michael and took whatever she wanted. "What do you read in me then?" He refilled his coffee cup. "Callie, you're far more dangerous than you realize." "Why?" She batted her eyes and stared at him. If either of them were dangerous, she'd bet money it was him. "You're on course to recklessness, when we both know it's the last thing you truly want." "I'm never anything other than dependable." True, but she hadn't expected Michael, who'd had any girl he ever wanted, to even care. Her own attraction to him had helped her sleep at night, but she knew better than to put stock in reality. Last night was for her, more about proving that she wasn't going to sit around and wait for her ex to ever come back. It was time to move on, but she'd never exactly been a wild child either. She sipped her coffee and wondered why it mattered what Michael said. Then she put the cup down and asked, "Why do you say that? If Chris knocked on our door and told you that everything was a mistake, that Roxanne wasn't pregnant with his child, how fast would you marry him?" Her heart felt like it stopped as her eyes widened. She never imagined that possible. The last time they had broken up, he had sworn he loved only her and realized it while dating others. But this time she couldn't believe it, not again. This time, even if he returned, she'd be stupid to go back again. Slowly she felt the heat of her skin radiate and lowered her head with a blush. She'd not leave Michael again. "I don't want that. You changed your mind in a day?" "No," she said fast. For someone who never cared about anyone, Michael clearly knew how to aim his questions. She retied her robe as she thought that she had left his side once, and perhaps that had hurt him, though she doubted it. "It's been coming for a while now. I didn't want to say yes. It was like a whirlwind that brought me to Mexico, and now that I'm out, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. Last night, with you, I became free." "Sex doesn't make you free. You're free and you've had at least 4 women in your bed since New Year's." 4? Eva, Brenda your Valentine date, Maria who you took to the Heat game, and Amelie who I met with you on South Beach. I didn't have sex with all of them. It was just Eva. The rest hadn't interested me. They were all beautiful. Her eyebrows arched as she rested her hand under her chin. You've had lots of it in the past, and I would say you're free to do whatever you want in your life. When you have my reputation and past, you're never free. People assume the worst. No. Michael had slept with half the cheerleading squad. In college, he'd gone from cheerleaders to sorority girls all over the campus. And every morning, he'd had breakfast with her. She had longed to be his, though she had Chris. Michael had always seemed shocked that his own bravado had earned him that many women, but she had been just a friend. Then his father had died 2 years ago, and now Michael dealt with how his father's schemes destroyed trust every day. But still, he picked up the remnants of the financial system his father had helped ruin, and Michael faced daily distrust because of what his father had done. None of this made Michael the worst of the worst, though. What happened to him was more sad than anything else. She scooted her chair closer and placed her hand on his arm. Even my brother thought you were redeemable, Michael. He'd have never sent me off with you if he thought the worst, or he was too happy to get rid of a man not worthy of you, that he figured you'd take care of yourself. That's not exactly trust. Not worthy? Her brother would never say that. He'd simply called Chris a multitude of names. But those words were Michael's. He had to know that he was better than he made himself sound. It's not distrust. He shook his head. I don't care about your brother's opinion of me. I only care about yours. He leaned closer. She could recall those dimples of his in her deepest sleep. She closed her eyes and remembered how she'd burned last night as she'd cupped those sexy indentations on his face. She swallowed. Then I'm happy we're friends. He became silent and withdrew. Was it possible that he saw her as more than just a one-night stand? Probably not, but her pulse quickened. Right now, she shouldn't ask. One day she might be ready for more with Michael, but for right now, all she needed was friendship and good sex. Anything else would confuse her, and besides, this was all Michael had to offer her. Chapter 5. The way Michael stared at her made her sense he'd like to rip her robe off her and take her again. Her inner core was warm just imagining the scenario, right here on the kitchen table. It was better if they did something besides make out. She swallowed and asked in a rushed tone, "Want to go to the beach? Did room service pack you a bathing suit as well?" He winked at her and her skin felt energized. Right now she needed to breathe. She tightened her robe and wished she had gotten dressed. How she acted near Michael was completely out of character for her. Until yesterday, she'd always done what was expected of her. It was ingrained in her bones to simply agree, but she'd become a different person overnight. It could be the after effects of her botched wedding, or it was Michael. She couldn't think on it too long right now. We can stay here and just use our pool. Then we can swim naked. Her face felt flushed. The last thing she needed was to think about last night. She sat straight to create some distance. So all you bought were those pajamas? No. A few other pieces and more condoms. Wow. Right now she had no idea. Michael Marshall confused her. She had lied to herself, as usual, but also to him on what he wanted, which is that they were friends with benefits. But in her mind's eye, when she didn't blink it away, she imagined a road trip in a convertible with the top down as Michael drove them near the ocean on some crazy adventure. She spent years dreaming about how they might live happy ever after, but that was impossible. She stood and glanced at him. I need a few hours to relax and close my eyes. Last night, you were demanding. He stayed in his seat but winked at her. I bought shorts that can be used to go into the ocean. Rest is fine for this morning and makes this afternoon much more appetizing. Confusion rang as she took one more gaze at his strong shoulders and then walked to her room. The few minutes alone chilled her and she cleaned up fast and went to her bag to get her clothes. In her suitcase, she shuffled through her new clothes she'd bought for her honeymoon and stopped to ponder the yellow bikini or her usual black one-piece swimsuit. The bikini was to show Chris that she was willing to try new things. With Michael, she'd wear it just to see the gleam of approval in his eyes. She dropped her old one piece and told herself honestly this was still a new beginning. But with Michael, no. The thought made her stop, but then she heard Michael close a door in the kitchen area. She finished dressing as she told herself her new beginning was for her to be alone. She found her cover-up and flip-flops. Once she was done, she popped her head into the living area and saw Michael in cotton shorts and a white t-shirt, sitting as he stared at a laptop. "What are you doing? Where did you get the MacBook? It's a good hotel and they had one available." So you trust the hotel with your financial information, but you don't risk your heart ever. "It's not a risk when I can sign out." She came closer and saw how he stared at her curves. "So you don't care about hackers. Got it. No, I just wanted to check some emails and check in on a few investments. Are you ready?" The entire past year might have been so much fun if she'd told Chris to go and hadn't walked away from Michael. She touched his arm and he stood to go. She glanced around the white room with small portraits of local life. This wasn't just a small room with a bed. If she'd spent this year with Michael and they were a real couple, she'd have lived in places like this. She massaged her neck. "This is much nicer than the hotel room I was supposed to be in for the week. If I had stayed on our date last year, would it have ended up in a place like this or in Waiting for You? It made me realize I needed to pull out all the stops." Her body lurched like she wanted to kiss him, but she held still. He knew exactly what to say, but then that was always his reputation. It was better not to put stock in her feelings now, so she walked briskly to the door. She went to the door and they ended up outside on the sunny day. It was better to ensure they were on the same page. "What stops? We're just friends, with benefits these days like you and Eva Bishop were until recently." "You are nothing like Eva." "How so?" They walked toward the beach and took advantage of their private access as no one else was on the white sands or near the blue umbrella with white beach chairs that she aimed for. "I don't want to discuss. We're both your longtime friends." He peeled off his white t-shirt and threw it on the chair next to where she placed her bag. "Eva and I were both looking to forget our lives, and we're both adults about exploring what we wanted from each other." No. Her body ached for Michael, and so did her heart. The lifetime of denial seemed stupid. She lowered her gaze to not look at his chiseled abdomen that reminded her of how hot last night was. "I know not to get attached to you, Michael. You don't believe in getting tied down. Who told you that?" Now she looked at him and took off her cover-up. "It was time to go into the ocean." "You did. When was that?" He followed her toward the ocean's edge. She dipped a toe in the water and felt it was warm. In Miami, the ocean was lukewarm, but here, the ocean was like warm soup. She never even looked over her shoulder. "In college, one day when we had lunch in the university center, you were always the exception to the rule." Doubtful. She walked deep enough and took a dive into the water. As she surfaced, she said, "You sounded sincere. I was talking about other women." "Of course I was sincere." He dove. She watched the water for his return. Then she circled. It was longer than she expected. Where was he? She was about to call his name, but she felt a hand on her leg. He surfaced as their bodies briefly touched, and she peeked into his blue eyes. "Is this how you get women to fall in love with you? 'Cause I have to say I'm flattered." He leaned closer and put his mouth next to her ear. Her pulse quickened as he said, "I don't ever say this to other women." She splashed him, mostly to make space between them. Then she swam, but he followed. The ocean water must be affecting her brain cells. She stopped swimming and turned toward him. Part of her hoped he'd want to spend every second of his life with her. "Okay, I'll play. What makes me an exception?" "Calliope. Besides the fact I have known you all your life and remember you in pigtails as you dodged water from the sprinkler on my front yard. You always spoke to me like you listened. Most people never bother to see past the obvious." The last part made no sense. "What obvious?" "That I'm rich and good-looking." She splashed him. "That's absolutely vain." He splashed her in return, but then winked. "You get to say that because you have a trust fund." Money in the bank wasn't a family, and life insurance with trust funds for her and her brother had never made her feel better when the moon was in the sky and she was alone. "I'd rather have my parents. That's where we differ. My parents were always searching for the bottom line, and Sandra and I never mattered as much. Her parents had been in love. His father would have gone to jail if not for his own suicide. She stepped closer to him and he stopped splashing. Even as children, she remembered vague moments like his father yelling at Michael on the front lawn when he wanted to play. The memory faded. Your father was horrible to you, but your mom was nice. I stopped remembering her. Cancer had taken his mother when he was 10. Her own mother had hugged her tight when she asked about death that night. No one must have hugged Michael. She placed her hand on his shoulder and leaned close. You shouldn't. She loved you. I don't want to talk about my mother. Now that you're free, what was it about Chris that held you to him all this time? You were faithful when no one else would be. Hard questions. She let him go. She wasn't ready to answer questions about herself. She turned toward the ocean and stared into the blue that went on forever. He was sweet when we were younger. He acted like he was the one with the trust fund. No, Chris had loved her at some point in their life. He must have. She wasn't stupid, though Michael chipped at the same point that Brandon had been telling for the past year. She turned to face Michael again. No, he was always telling me to be conservative and not spend. The Chris you knew and the Chris the first saw were two different people. Don't let anyone else ever control your money, Calliope. All of this was too much. She wanted to not think about anything anymore, especially her bad choices. Fair enough. Now will you kiss me, Michael? He followed her command. His hand traced her body, and she felt her nipples pucker as his body came closer to her. As his lips descended, he said, Calliope, it's time for you to admit you want a you and me. Then he kissed her, and she would agree to anything as long as this moment continued, forever. Chapter 6. I love you. The words almost floated out of her as she stayed next to Michael. She bit her tongue to hold it in. Her body ached from his touch. Michael's strong shoulders and those dimples of his gave her a sense of home and belonging that she'd not felt in years. Perhaps since her parents had tucked her into bed for that last night. She snuggled in closer and let her eyes rest. This one moment needed to be cherished. At least she hadn't told him something silly. To touch him, her fingers laced with his, and she dozed. A few minutes later, the moon began to grow in the sky. She must have slept more than she realized. She sat up in bed and glanced at Michael, who smirked as he stared at her naked body. If only he might love her. Uh-oh. She tugged the covers over herself, but laid her head next to his on the pillow. His fingers stayed entwined with hers. Michael, what is it you want out of life? What? He turned on his side and leaned over her. He brushed her hair away from his elbow. She wouldn't tell him, I love you. She would not say those 3 little forbidden words. Her heart beat faster. If she could help him in some way to figure out what he wanted from life beyond revenge against his father, perhaps he'd realize he could love her too. What is it you want now? His blue eyes seemed to gather into a cloud as his body stiffened. I want to prove to my father I'm nothing like what he said. Hard to do now. I know, but he still lives in my head. Every day I wake up, I want to show him that he's wrong. She reached out for his withdrawing fingers and held his wrist. He had to believe her. Clearly you're not. Michael, you don't steal and con people. You use your brain that you always possessed to do math and make connections no one else sees yet. He let his body relax again, and she could feel his hardness growing. He didn't offer another round. Not what I mean. You know too much about me. I only recently learned more. His anger was only going to hurt him in the long run. She ran her hands up his muscular side. So let me ask a few questions. Do you do illegal acts to make money? Absolutely not. Cheating is for cowards. Then she blinked. Again, that sounds like your dad. You should let that go. He sat up in bed. She followed but missed his nakedness. I can't. I've been investigated 7 times in the past year because some investor that bet against me wanted to prove I must be a criminal like my father. The ghost of his father never let him rest. So why did you go into banking? He grinned and stood to retrieve his underwear. I like to see the face of shock on the face of any man when he realizes he was bested because he wasn't as smart as me. He was better than he let himself believe. Michael, it's not about winning or losing with a ghost. Many people have horrible things they went through and they aren't scared. His jaw tightened. I'm not scared of anything. Scared? I meant scarred. He picked up his pants. She threw the covers off and put her underwear on as she said, "You are walking around so full of anger that you don't let others in." At least I try to protect myself, Calliope, and don't let others walk over me. No. He was right. She let others walk over her. She even bought a wedding dress to let it happen. Her cheek began to tick. I don't. You said yes to Chris though you knew about Roxanne. Her eyes widened. She tugged on her shirt and pants and she refused to look at him, while adrenaline rushed in her veins. I didn't know about Roxanne. Don't lie. Your forehead still gets red and your vein is throbbing in your forehead. Her gaze shot up. Her nervous tick sounded like a lifetime problem when he described it. How do you remember so much about me? Calliope, I don't forget any details ever. She collapsed onto the bed and wanted to curl into a ball. She didn't, but her shoulders slumped. This was too much. He'd never loved any woman and never believed in happy ever after. For her to say I love you was a stupid impulse. Then her gaze met his and her face tightened. Why though? I bet you $100 you cannot name the woman you dated before Eva. He sat beside her on the bed and lowered his voice. I never dated Eva. Her lips curled while she raised her eyebrow. Whatever, can you? I never agreed. She sat and went toward her bag. This was too much. She shook her head as she unzipped it. So you can't. Her name doesn't matter. She found her clothes in the drawer and tucked them into her bag. That's what I thought. She was being stupid again if she trusted her feelings because she was seconds from being the wife of a man she hadn't trusted but kept her mouth shut. How could she ever trust this? It was time to stop. Michael stood beside her and placed his hand on her bag to stop her as she tried to pack her shoes. Calliope, what's happened? We just had a wonderful time and you naked under me was enjoyable. She reached out and picked up his hand to move it. Then she opened his palm and removed his hold. Free, she placed her shoes in the corner of the bag, completing her packing. I almost said I loved you, and I know you don't want anything like that from me. His face went white. What? Yeah, she'd been right not to call out in that moment. Her skin was electrified, and she must be blushing, but the energy felt like it echoed in her entire body. If she left, she'd forget everything in the bathroom. Darn. She went to the bathroom and found her toiletry bag. She rolled the bag to fit it and returned. It's okay, Michael. You are right. I define myself through relationships and I almost married Chris because I was terrified of being alone. Color returned to his face. So you don't love me? Would it matter to you? Done. She packed the bag and stood it up on its wheels, ready for her to bolt at the first chance. Yes. The word filled the room and the electric storm in her skin calmed, like she believed him. Then she took a deep breath and shook her head. My heart beat pounds in my chest because I want to hear that you love me, but I've heard you many times say that you don't believe in marriage or love. I'm vulnerable and confused right now and not in the same place as you. You want just physical, but I'm dreaming about more than you can offer. Michael, it's time I go. Wait, he reached out and took her hand in his. She took one look at his fingers, rough fingers that made her body feel like it was a temple of desire. I know, impulses ruled her now, but the calm she felt beside Michael made her feel that her imagined life was possible, if only he wanted her forever. She lowered her lashes. Why? I want to lay my cards on the table too. Trust him. If he said he loved her, she wasn't sure she could trust anything. She would be foolish right now if she believed him, but her heart begged that she'd hear something like that while she nodded. What? I want you more than any other woman. Want, wasn't it? She felt like she'd turn into a pool of water at his feet. That's not enough for me, but Chris and his empty promises were. The glass shards that remained of her feelings continued to crunch and grate against her skin. He made promises. If I give my word, then it's done. There is nothing empty about me. This was why Michael felt more like home than ever. Despite the almost wedding, she wasn't even dreaming about Chris. It was all Michael. She swallowed. So what is it that you want from me? I want you naked and willing in bed. I want your opinions to keep flowing, and I want to hear you laugh more. That doesn't mix with happy ever after, holding hands when they died, and that was all she wanted. She'd not say that either. She rubbed her forehead and reached for the handle of her bag. Friends with benefits isn't going to work for me. Michael, thank you for everything. She kicked the bottom of her bag lightly and walked toward the door. You're leaving? Yes. Goodbye. She closed the door and raced toward the front. The hotel lobby could call her a taxi. Every cell in her body wished to remain with Michael, but this was like a snow globe moment of time in her life. Now it was time to forget all of this and figure out how in the world she was to be happy in her own skin. Chapter 7. Calliope hadn't come back. Michael sat in the hotel room for a few hours, wondering if she would. She'd packed and left so fast that his head spun. Once he realized she was truly gone, he'd ordered his plane to be fueled. It was time to go. He packed the few items he'd purchased into a plastic bag, and then his phone rang. He read his sister's name on the screen. Sandy, Michael, why weren't you on the ship? The cruise. He had forgotten. He peeked out the window and saw no car. It was clear that if he stayed, he'd be alone. I helped Calliope get out of the hotel. Did you get my bag? Yeah, of course. She sounded as though she'd stopped typing something. Where are you now? Still in Mexico, but I ordered my flight home tonight. The last person he'd tell about today was his sister. Like Calliope, all he had was one sibling left. Only his was about to get married and live a happily ever after with the man she always wanted. He was the one who'd never deserved that and wouldn't put himself out there. I want to talk to you about Colts and my wedding. Will you give me away? Good. She hadn't asked. He swallowed and then picked up the plastic bag. The headlights of a taxi came into view. Yes, Michael. What's wrong? Nothing. At least she couldn't see him. His thoughts raced that Calliope deserved better. It's in your voice. How? He'd said one word. He walked toward the lobby and handed in his key. They passed him a receipt, and he nodded as he said to his sister on the phone, Nothing's wrong, Mom. Don't be sarcastic. How was Calliope? She must have been mortified. I'd have wanted to punch Chris right in the middle of the wedding. He wished she had. Instead, he'd put all his energy into the one thing he'd wanted, the bride. The words never formed for his sentence. He swallowed and then walked outside and opened the car door. My cab is here. 1 second. He slid in, slammed the door, and spoke to the driver about the airport. The moment the man drove, he sat backwards. He held his phone in his ear but had nothing to say. The past 36 hours were not up for discussion. Continue. He should have said he had to go earlier. He stared out the window and imagined Calliope's face. Continue what? How was Calliope? No. Again, he wouldn't tell his sister. He rubbed his eyes. She was rebellious. I took advantage. How? Calliope, his sister Sandy, even Eva, none of them should trust him and deserved better. I'm not a good guy. I shouldn't have been the one who helped her escape. You slept with her on her wedding night. He winced. That sounds bad when you say it. Michael, I thought you liked her. His chest constricted as the car turned onto the runway, nearing his plane. Why would you think that? The name Marshall was clear on the side, and someone waited next to the ramp. He narrowed his gaze to see through the newly formed fog. I'm arriving at the airport, Sandy. I need to go. Answer the question. Do you like Calliope? The car drove closer. The figure that waited was a woman, but from the outline he understood instantly that it wasn't Calliope. I like all women. Fine, don't answer. Guess you won't mind if I ask her to be a bridesmaid. Don't get involved. The cab stopped and he could see the dark hair and icy blue eyes of his ex. He paid the driver as he said, Wait, Eva is here. Oh yeah, that's why I called. What? So this wasn't to check on him. He grabbed his plastic bag. Sandra smacked her lips together like she was still a teenager, though neither of them were. She wanted a ride home and felt embarrassed about staying on the cruise. I told her that you weren't on the ship either, so I told her to stay near the airport and that when I heard from you, I'd let her know. Once again, his sister directed his social life and ignored the fact he now ran Marshall Investments. He stood and nodded at Eva as he said to his sister, "Fine, bye." As he approached and put his phone in his back pocket, Eva walked toward him and wrapped the blue shawl tighter around her neck. Sandy said I could hitch a ride. You could have asked me yourself. She crossed her arms. We didn't part on the best of circumstances. He waved her to go up the stairs on the plane. We agreed to stay friends. The moment she was on the top step, she turned and looked down at him. But we haven't really talked. He waited till he made it to the top and stared down at her. What's to say? You started dating someone else. You were never open with me. Guess we'll never know. Then he waited for her to go inside and pick a seat. He handed his bag to his staff and followed her to take the seat across the aisle from her. Sandy's words about liking Calliope replayed in his head. If Calliope was here, he'd have found a way to seduce her and have her join the Mile High Club. Now his body felt spent as he sat near one of the most physically beautiful women in the world. As the plane ascended, he closed his eyes and once again imagined Calliope's smile. Eva's words screeched in his ears and brought him back to the present. Michael, I am sorry. Being pregnant has really made me reassess a lot of my life. As I can't work as an actor for the next year, I really had to buckle down and figure out what's next for me. You're pregnant? His eyes widened as they opened. No wonder she took the $2 million bribe to try to stop Jay and Penny's wedding. Eva hadn't saved a dime. She pushed her hair out of her face and let her shoulders relax. Yeah, don't worry. It's not yours, but please don't tell anyone. I didn't think it would be. I didn't know you were. She patted her belly that seemed flat to him. I won't be able to hide it much longer. I feel like I'm showing already. The only person I told was the father. I couldn't tell. She lowered the blue shawl she wore. Power of my shawl. Promise you won't say a word to anyone. Okay, it's your life, not mine. Where did you go after the wedding? To heaven, at least for a few minutes. None of this was information that he'd share with Eva. I helped check Calliope out of the hotel. You helped anyone but yourself? Another reason. Don't be crass. I'm impressed. Michael, I think we've both grown up since the last time we talked. She lowered her chair to lie down. Fair enough. Why don't you get some sleep? I want to check in with work. Soon the plane was quiet and he used his laptop to check on the proposal from Morgan Enterprises for his investment firm. Then he remembered Calliope lived in a building he owned. If he knew she was home, he'd relax and not think more about her. So he opened the account files and checked for activity in #2412, where she lived. She must be home as the power usage fluctuated in her unit of the building he owned. He quickly closed the computer. She wouldn't appreciate him checking on her, but he didn't care. He had to know she was okay. As he returned to work, his shoulders lost some of the tension. Calliope was safe at her home, safe from him. Now he could soon sleep as well. Chapter 8. Calliope stretched and let her hand trace the tapered glass of her wonderful shower as the water fell on her. Her bathroom overlooked the Atlantic Ocean from her Coconut Grove condo, and with every water drop on her head, she felt her muscles were at least able to move. Finished, she stepped out. Now she had a new lease on life. Calliope needed to get her life in order, and it would start with her bank account. Michael and Brandon had both mentioned finances as the starting point. It was easy enough to open letters that were on her desk. She towel-dried her hair, dressed, and went to start this whole new life alone. The letter opener was a brass antique and reminded her of her grandmother as she sliced open the page. The wedding was all out of this one account, and she should know exactly how much she paid to let people see that farce. She swayed on her feet as she read. The $200,000 cash withdrawal 2 days ago made her face feel like it drained of all its blood, while her fingers tingled from the papers. Chris had taken her money without mentioning it. He still had access. She had to go online and check her balance in her checking account. She logged in and then realized she could no longer wait. Money was gone and she hadn't done it. Even if she pressed charges, she had given him access so the police would tell her to get lost. She had to get his name off everything. She picked up her phone, unsure what to do to get his name off her accounts, and called Brandon. Her brother didn't answer. Michael would know how to stop this. Chris had no right to continue taking money from her. The thought made her stop for a moment. Then she dialed Michael's number. 2 rings later, he said, "Hello?" His voice alone rushed through her, and she felt safe and protected. Yesterday and her "I love you" stuff didn't matter. She clutched the phone and stared at her grandfather clock. "Where are you?" "Home?" The pendulum swung back and forth as he said, "I made it here a few hours after you did." So he knew when she came home. She swallowed. "Can I meet you somewhere? I need your help." "With what?" "Good." His voice told her that he was still there for her. She sat in her chair and closed her eyes. "Chris has access to my accounts still, and I want to get his name off my papers. So you want me to take you to the bank?" The firm tone of his voice made her open her eyes and widen them as she stared out the window. "Yes, I've never gone there, but $10,000 was withdrawn this morning. Give me 10 minutes. Then he hung up the phone. She sipped her tea and knew he'd be here for her for whatever came next. Part of her wanted to kick the wall and think about Chris, but then her thoughts returned to how Michael had kissed her and she calmed. Then she stood and checked her hair, put on her lipstick, and found her shoes. Then she glanced at her phone and realized the phone call was 15 minutes ago. She massaged her neck as she thought about seeing Michael. Then her doorman called. She grabbed a shawl, locked her door, and took the elevator downstairs to meet him. As she breezed past her doorman, her gaze landed on Michael's black Tesla and him leaning against the door. Their gazes met, and she felt instantly protected again. Inside, she felt like she melted, and it wasn't because of the sun. She lowered her head to protect herself as she went to stand in front of him. "You're late. I was on the phone with Peter Morgan." He opened the passenger door of his Tesla for her, and she slipped inside. A second later, he closed her door, ran around the car, and joined her on the driver's side. "We put a hold on your accounts, and now I'm bringing you in to meet with one of his accountants." He started the car. She turned toward him and stared at his handsome profile. Yesterday, his muscular shoulder had held her close, and today, she wanted him to put his arms around her again. She reached up to play with her pendant, but realized it wasn't there as she said, "Thanks. I was panicked when I saw that money was gone." He turned the car and she jerked in her seat and almost fell on him as the tires squealed. "Chris will knock on your door again if you cut him off like this." As the ocean was behind them and the bridge allowed them to go faster, she nodded. "I'll have to be like you then, and enjoy seeing his face when he sees I'm not his unending bank account." The curve of his lips ticked upward. "Why did you call me?" Again, her body wished he held her hand. She dropped her hands to her side and tried to remind herself friends with benefits wasn't for her. She swallowed and said, "I trust you. Yesterday you made me think you didn't want me in your life." No, the opposite was true. Adrenaline mixed with whatever had calmed her now. She needed to relax, and she hugged her waist and stared at the road toward the bank. She then chose her words, "Don't be silly. It was about me, not you. You left my bed." Now she glanced at him and his face was tinged red, and she wondered if he was embarrassed. Her body warmed just thinking about what they had done last night, but she curled her hands together. "It wasn't your bed. It was a hotel. Technicality." He turned into the bank parking lot. Her head whipped from the 90-degree turn as he said, "You left me. I would never." "Well, okay, I did, but that was Mexico. Sex confuses me, but I'll always be your friend." As he parked the car and turned off the engine, she caught her breath. "Would you leave me when I need you?" I'm here, as always. Because you're my rock. Technically, he had always been with everyone else, though she had Chris. For her, now, this was her first moments without Chris. She opened her car door and hopped out. "We're here," he called out as he stood in the parking lot. He then placed his hand on the small of her back to lead her inside. "Let's get Chris off your accounts and out of your heart. You, not him, are in my heart." She bit back the response. It made no sense. If she had replaced Michael with Chris as someone who might love her, then she might have been happy? No. There had to be something wrong with her thinking. She hugged her waist as they stepped into the cold blast of air conditioning. Michael still had his hand on the small of her back, which made her tingle and made her feel he protected her. But he had no clue how she felt. He led her past a roped line of people and toward an office. He then knocked and led her inside. A secretary waved them to sit, and a banker brought forth papers. "Miss Campbell, please read everything to ensure this is what you want. Time to be a big girl." She picked up the pen and glanced at the papers. "Can I ask what you were told?" The banker answered, "That you wanted to ensure Christopher Sommers no longer had access to your accounts." "Yes." She clicked the end of the pen as she read the papers. "That's what I want. Where do I sign?" He reached over and pointed to the spots that had an X mark already. "Here and here." She signed in all the places and handed the papers back. "I'm the only signatory on my account now?" "Yes." The banker took the papers and then typed into his computer. "Do you want to change your beneficiary?" She was about to stand but scooted her chair back instead. "Who is that?" "Brandon Campbell." She waved her hands in front of her. "Keep my brother, that's fine." A knock on the door behind her caused her to crane her neck as a nice-looking dark-haired man nodded at Michael. "Is everything all right in here?" Michael stood and his handsomeness just radiated through his skin and made her buzz. "Calliope is signing the papers now. Thanks for setting this up so fast, Peter." Peter. He must be Peter Morgan. Chris had always avoided any Morgan parties they were invited to, as he claimed the family had too much drama. Calliope stood and waited next to Michael. Michael and Peter shared a joke concerning his working for Morgan Enterprises, as he made them more money these days. She wrapped her arm in his and waited. Then Peter said, "It's a pleasure meeting you, Miss Campbell. Michael, if you and Calliope would like to come to my wife's Veterans Benefit Gala tonight, please let my secretary know." Her lips parted as Michael patted her hand and said, "I will let her know." A gala as Michael's date might be fun if he no longer expected friends with benefits. If he wanted, she'd be open to dating him, and she'd see one of the Morgan parties. She pinched her elbow to stay grounded. As the door closed and the banker left, she picked up her pocketbook and said to Michael, "So that was Peter Morgan?" He opened the door for her and waited for her to pass. "He's nothing like his father either." She winked at him as she passed, and then waited for him to follow as she said, "Sounds like you both have more in common than you realize." As they made their way through the bank, neither of them said anything. Once they made it to his car, he stopped in front of the passenger seat and turned toward her. "Calliope, tonight will you go to the benefit with me?" The sun beating on her head stopped mattering. Her heart sped up as she imagined being held in Michael's arm, all dressed up in her finest. Her lips parted as she met his gaze. "As your date and not a friend, yes?" He hadn't blinked. This time, she'd not ditch their date and make another stupid decision. She reached out and brushed her hand against his. The sparks she felt in her fingers told her everything she needed to know, as she said, "Good. I'll look forward to tonight then." He let go of her touch and opened her door. As he waved her inside, he said, "Then I'll drop you off and pick you up at 8. As the door closed and he ran around to join her, she realized her hands shook her pocketbook. She put it on the floor and waited. Michael was good to her, and tonight was good. This was the start of her new life. Chapter 9. Calliope fixed her hair for this evening and glanced at it one more time. Her shiny blonde hair was now perfect and showed off her nape. Hopefully Michael noticed her and realized as a date she was even better than a friend. Then her door opened in the other room. She walked into her living room and saw her brother putting his key in his pocket. She crossed her arms. "Brandon, why are you here?" He pointed to the window that overlooked the street. "Where were you with Michael Marshall?" So he saw her. She shrugged and walked closer. Brandon pointed toward the couch. She stroked her arms and thought about Michael, but then she blinked. She hoped Brandon didn't see through her as she slipped onto the edge of her sofa. "He took me to the bank. Chris withdrew money from my account today and I wanted to get him off all my accounts." He sat next to her. "You did?" She nodded. His gaze narrowed. "That doesn't sound like you, to be so responsible when it comes to Chris." "I'm different." "No." This wasn't good. Brandon had to see she was right. Her shoulders stiffened. "He left me at the altar." He stared at her hair. That was in an updo for tonight, as he said. "You've been making excuses for him for years." She had settled for years with someone she herself hadn't loved. Her fingers tapped the edge of the chair and she refused to look at her brother. "I'm done with him now. Good." Despite how her skin jittered, so she took a deep breath. Brandon knew more about Michael and what he'd done for the past year. She tugged her ear and turned to face him. "What do you think about Michael?" Again his brow bunched and it felt like he saw straight through her. "I think he's a good guy, but not good for you." To stop tapping, she let her fingers massage the back of her neck. "So I don't deserve a good guy?" He leaned closer. "Not what I said. Michael has a history of using women." The excuse Michael made just flew out of her mouth. "Most women don't see past his dimples and bank account." He froze and then his hand covered his chin. He must see through her. She cringed and waited as he leaned away. "Uh-oh." She hugged her waist. "What?" "Responsibility. And now you're about to defend Michael." Her brother's words shouldn't make her feel like she stood in front of an execution line. She'd made bad choices before and let herself live in her own delusions. This time with Michael, she'd had her eyes opened and she was going to put her heart on the line. She lifted her chin. "I'm not defending him." He reached out and placed his hand on her arm. "Are you falling for him now? If he wanted friends with benefits only, then she'd say no." Brandon saw through her. She stood and paced to get away. "Don't be stupid." The second she turned to stare at him, she saw he had stood as well. He massaged his chin. "Yeah, it's written on your face, sis. Michael is not a good choice." "Why?" Her heart shouldn't thrash in her chest. Brandon had no say in her life, so why should she let her brother's words echo through her and feel like the words caved inside her? "I've never heard of him being faithful to any woman, and you only want to be in love." She paced again and refused to look at him. "There is nothing wrong with love. Here we go." She turned and then watched as her brother came toward her. He placed his hands on her shoulders. "Sis, I'm warning you now, don't fall for a guy who isn't open to love." The mirror on the wall let her see how her face turned bright red. "I'm not in love with him." He stepped away. "You're not?" Loving Michael was like breathing if she was absolutely truthful with herself for the second, though she'd not say that. Years of settling for Chris replayed in her mind. Instead, she lowered her lashes and stared at a picture of her parents on a side table. Her mother and father had loved them both and each other. She shook her head. "It's not possible to be in love with him. Because if I was, then I lied to myself for years about my feelings for Chris." Brandon turned and stared at the picture of their parents. He went to the table and picked up their mother's pendant and handed it to her. "No, you haven't been in love with Chris for a long time." That was obvious. The necklace. She had worn this every day in college as a reminder of their mom. She fastened it around her neck again and let memories of her mother wearing it as she baked a cake with her hit her hard. She hadn't felt safe and happy like that in years. She clutched the pendant. "So it's impossible for me to feel anything for Michael. I'm not stupid. I don't want you to fall for Michael." Her gaze darted to meet his. "You don't get a say in my love life." "True, but here's the thing. You're my sister and I love you." "I love you too." And I see when you're lying to yourself, and I think you're denying your feelings for Michael. I've thought so for a long time. The way you always perked up and checked yourself in a mirror when he walked in a room was a huge signal." She let the necklace go and felt her skin radiate heat. "I never did that, okay?" His sarcastic tone rang in her ears at the same second his phone rang. He checked the call and clutched it in his hand. "Then why do you blush? Either way, I have to go. See you later." She followed him to the door where he hugged her. Once he let her go, she waited for him to walk away and then locked her door. A moment later, she rushed into her bedroom, their conversation forgotten. Tonight's benefit was formal wear, and she had a peach dress that made her look angelic and thin. If Michael had that glow in his eyes when he stared at her, then all the trouble to get ready was worth it. She rushed and fixed her makeup to match her hair. The pendant stayed now. She had intended to wear it to her wedding, but had forgotten it at home. Maybe it was a sign. At least Brandon had found it and she could wear it again. The doorbell chimed and she checked her dress. Then she swung the door wide open to see Michael's sexy dimples. Her gaze drifted lower and checked out his hot body covered in a black tux clearly made for his every muscle. He leaned against her door and asked, "Are you ready?" This was time to fix her mistakes in Mexico and give them a shot. She reached forward and tugged him inside. As the door closed, she pressed her back to it and stared into his blue eyes. "Michael, I want to talk to you." He glanced up and down her form. There should be no secrets. This was it. "You look amazing, Calliope." She stood straight and ignored her goosebumps or how electricity shot through her. "I still think I'm falling in love with you." He stepped back. "What?" "No." The words rang true. He wasn't a replacement. The nervousness dampened her skin and she took a deep breath. "I know you don't love me. It's okay, but I just need to say the words." He reached for her and a sigh escaped through her parted lips. He leaned closer. "That's just it. You're the one I wanted, more than I wanted Christmas, but I don't deserve you. More than presents and laughter and being with those who loved her as they sang near a pine tree." "Seriously?" She shook her head and clung to his shoulders. "What are you saying?" "Kiss me, now." He pressed his lips to hers. Nothing else mattered anymore. She wrapped her arms around his neck and followed his lead. Tonight she'd told the truth and she was his. Chapter 10. Michael kept his hand on the small of Calliope's back as they made their way through the crowded mansion on Star Island. If they had stayed in her apartment, he'd have wanted to rip her clothes off, but her words, "I love you," haunted him. Calliope deserved more than him, but the thought of letting her go sent bile up his throat. Going out meant he had a delay in responding. The clink of glasses as a group in the distance laughed made Calliope turn her head. She should have been at parties for the past few years and not in hiding. He pointed her toward the back and she reached out and squeezed his arm. He stood taller and led her toward the bar. He motioned for service when he spotted his sister and her new fiancé. He ordered a glass of Pinot Grigio for Calliope and a whiskey neat for himself. Her touch lingered on his offer of the glass, and then she withdrew her fingers despite how she wanted to hold him. Without a word, she composed herself and nodded at his sister, who hugged her right away. "Hey, it's been a long time. You're here with Michael?" His face felt hot. Sandy would have an opinion. Calliope put her hand on his shoulder. "He invited me." Sandy placed her glass in front of her lips in an attempt to block the huge grin on her face. "I knew he liked you." "No." Michael stepped in front of Calliope and blocked his sister from her view. "Sandy, when is your wedding?" The grin on her face flickered, and she crossed her arms. Without a word, he understood that she needed to back off. She dropped her arms and reached out for Colt's hand. She stared into his eyes as she said, "We're still picking venues. Once I know the place and their calendar, we can make a final decision." Calliope bounced forward. "I remember seeing you kissing at the senior breakfast at the Rusty Pelican." "High school?" Michael stood taller. His sister had been visibly upset her freshman year of college and acted like someone broke her heart. She never mentioned who. His hands curled into fists. "Wyatt, how long have you been making my sister wait?" Sandy stepped in front of Wyatt. "Michael, what matters is that he asked me to marry him and I said yes." Calliope shrugged and his attention went toward her as she played with her necklace. "I like the rusty pelican, Sandy. It's overlooking the intracoastal and has that giant room for a reception." Then over her head, he saw Peter Morgan and his wife. He'd let this thing with his sister and Wyatt go for now. It was time to say hello to his potential investor so he could get Calliope out, and no one would know anything. He reached out and squeezed her hand. "Glad Calliope could help. Talk to you both later." He led her away from his sister and into the crowd. Calliope bumped into Jennifer Gonzalez, who then gave her a dirty look. He quickly tugged Calliope's arm and managed her away from the other woman, as Calliope asked, "Where are we going?" "Home." The thought made no sense. He slowed. "I want to be alone with you wouldn't make sense since he'd brought her here." He pressed his lips together and felt someone tap his shoulder. He glanced over. "Let me introduce you to Peter Morgan and his wife Belle." Her gaze narrowed. "Yes." She then held out her hand to shake Belle's and Peter's hands as she said, "It's a pleasure to see you both. Belle, this is Calliope Campbell. I met her in the bank today. She has a seat on the board at Morgan Enterprises." Her eyes widened. "I never go." He glanced at the clock and his palms felt sweaty, so he made a fist and hoped no one noticed. Peter said, "Calliope, Michael will ask you to make an exception for tomorrow afternoon's meeting." He tapped his wife's shoulder and pointed toward the Hawk sisters as he told his wife, "We must go. Please let me know." Calliope stepped away from him and lifted her chin. "What's he talking about? I refuse to be pushed around and used again. I'm not Chris." As he brushed his finger on her arm, he had a jolt. He'd plead his innocence away from the crowd as his stomach filled with knots. She probably wouldn't believe he hadn't known. "We'll talk about it in private." She nodded and pointed toward the doors that led to a patio, and then a walkway where a yacht was docked and the bay overlooked Miami. "Walk with me to the intracoastal then. I want to know what's going on." His head buzzed with the question of what to do when she refused to believe. His feet dragged, but then he squared his shoulders. "Fair enough." Without a word, they smiled and nodded their way through the party. The small walkway behind the mansion provided dark corners where they might sit on a bench and talk. She led him toward one of them that was surrounded by palm trees. Once they were away from people, she flipped her hair behind her shoulders. "Earlier you demanded we come. What's going on?" His muscles tightened. He imagined how she'd look at him with glassy eyes and then walk out of his life forever as he said, "I am starting an investment firm and Morgan Enterprises has offered to fund. The vote is this month and there are some that believe I am a risk because of my father." She hugged her waist as she stared at him with fawn-like eyes that refused to blink. "Did you sleep with me to get my vote?" This was exactly what he'd feared would happen if she found out. His legs widened to anchor himself. "Absolutely not. I didn't even know you had a seat on his board. Why would I know that?" "I guess you wouldn't." She dropped her arms. "I'm just on edge that we came here and you're avoiding being alone." "I'm not." A sinking feeling in his chest grew wider. "You didn't say anything when I said I loved you. Is this why?" His head spun as he tried to follow her train of thought. "I didn't say anything because you deserve better. Michael, all I want is to be with you. I left you in Mexico because I spent years of my life wishing Chris was a good enough replacement for you. I always wanted you. It doesn't have to be hard." His body loosened and his stomach slowly unknotted. "Calliope, I'm not the guy for you." She batted her eyelashes. "Because you don't love me? Because I do." He reached out to hold her. He wanted to take her as his right now and not let go. No one ever believed in him so easily. Then she acted like he wanted a hug and her arms wrapped around his neck. She smelled like roses and his body couldn't deny how much he wanted her as she said, "You do? Yeah." She kissed his neck and then stood on her tiptoes. "So let's go inside, say goodbye and then go home. I want to be alone." If she believed in him, then anything else was possible. He traced her arms around him and then unwrapped them. He placed his forehead on hers. I can't say no to you. Give me 5 minutes. I want to tell Peter the first don't need his deal. She grabbed his suit jacket for a second. Don't do that on my account. Home with Calliope sounded good. He had one person to shake hands with for his company, and then he was free with no obligations. He took her hand in his and placed it on his heart, as long as you promise to miss the vote. So can we go? If he shook this hand, he'd not have to do anything important at all tomorrow, except take Calliope again and again. 5 minutes and I'm yours for the night. She dropped her hands and winked. That's a good start. I'll go talk to your sister. In 5 minutes, he'd leave with the prettiest woman he ever met. For once, he had everything he ever needed. Tonight, she'd be his. Chapter 11. Calliope kissed Michael lightly, and then felt a hum in her skin as she walked inside the mansion and glanced around for Sandra and Wyatt. She wouldn't interrupt if they danced, but if they were just talking, it would be fine for a few minutes. Michael squeezed her hand, and then they walked off in the direction of Peter Morgan and a few other men. She adjusted her dress and headed toward the bar, where she'd last seen his sister. She bumped into Matthew Morgan, who was supposed to star in her brother's film, but he seemed distracted. She continued, and then she felt a chill race up her spine. She turned and saw her blonde, blue-eyed ex-fiancé standing close to her. She crossed her arms as he said, "Calliope, Chris." She nodded. Every cell in her body wanted to explode, but she held back her fury. She held up her head and glared at him, daring him to speak. "It's good to see you." He lowered his gaze and his cheeks were slightly red. No, it wasn't good to see him. She took a deep breath. "I didn't expect to see you here." Clearly, she raised her eyebrow as she glanced around for a sign of Roxanne. The woman wasn't close. She rolled her shoulders and then turned to leave. "I should go." He reached out and caught her wrist. "Are you here with Michael?" "Yeah." She tugged her wrist out of his grasp as bile collected in her throat. "Be careful there." Her forehead wrinkled as she crossed her arms and glanced at a waiter that passed. "Why? You're the one who can't be faithful. Your judgment isn't the best all the time. Right now, it's revenge sex you're having." Revenge? Was that why Michael had a hard time believing her feelings? A bitterness grew in her stomach as she felt her hands ball into fists. Who is in my bed or not in my bed is no longer your concern. I wish it was. His voice softened. The bile dissipated until he finished his sentence. "You do know Eva is pregnant, Michael's ex." She took the champagne off the waiter's tray now and swallowed it in one swig. "What? So you didn't know?" This wasn't a question. Something ate at her insides, and it felt like a wolf wanted to growl from within her soul as she lifted her chin. "I know you cheated on me and Roxanne is pregnant." Chris reached out and put both his hands on her forearms like he'd hug her. "I still love you and want you back." She wiggled her shoulders to shake him off as she avoided his gaze. "If you loved me, that wouldn't have happened." He reached up and cupped her chin. "It was a stupid mistake. I'd put you first for the rest of our lives if you forgave me and took me back." No. Her mind flashed to the night before the wedding and Chris's last kiss as he escorted her to her hotel room. She felt cold and bored. Then her mind returned to this afternoon as Michael made her body ache to feel all of him. "I'd forget your fling with Michael, and we could both start fresh." If he had fathered a child, at least it had been before he'd ever kissed her. She threw her hands up to get out of Chris's arms. No, a familiar hand brushed the small of her back. She turned slightly and saw Michael while she stepped closer into his arms. He smelled like a home she never had as he said, "Calliope, is everything okay? All of this could be worked out." She turned to face him. His blue eyes mesmerized her. She swallowed and asked, "Michael, is Eva pregnant?" With an intake of breath, he surveyed both of them. "How do you both know that?" "So she is." Her shoulders slumped. He glanced at Chris like he was a snake. "You both shouldn't know. She told me the only one who knew was the father. Chris just told me." She pointed and stepped to the side. Michael stepped in front of her and placed his hand on her side to ensure she was far behind him as he asked Chris, "Did you father 2 children while cheating on Calliope?" "It's not how it sounds." Chris backed up. "And we both know she's better in bed than Calliope." Before she could even gasp, Michael's hand balled into a fist and he punched Chris. Chris lost his footing and stumbled. Then he reached out and punched Michael as another man put his hands around Chris to stop him. She jumped forward and grabbed Michael's shoulders. No one should fight because of her. Everyone stared at the pair of them. The silence was deafening. Finally, he glanced at her, and she pulled Michael away. He followed while she said, "Michael, let's get out of here." Gladly, she reached for his arm and held him close as they made their way through the crowd and away from Chris. Once they made it out the front door, there were only a few groups that were saying goodbye to each other. Calliope reached up and traced Michael's face to survey where Chris had touched him. In the dark, she couldn't make out much of a bruise, though he'd feel it. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, my hand will be fine." He nodded and reached toward his face and drew her hand lower. She whispered, "It was quite a punch." "He hurt you." His face hardened. Her body trembled, so she squeezed his hand. "So you hit him for me and not Eva." His chin rested on her forehead. "For you mostly, but Eva deserves better than getting involved in that jerk's web of lies." If he kissed her, would it hurt his face? She felt her nipples harden in her gold dress. "He made it seem like you were the father of Eva's baby." "Eva and I were over 6 months ago." Why did you go back to Chris the first time?" She closed her eyes and prayed. Then she heard a voice behind her, and she stepped away from Michael to give room. A second later, Sandy said, "Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to know if my brother was okay." Michael met her gaze and then turned toward his sister. "I'm fine, Sandy." His sister shook her head and checked the side of his face. "You've never picked a fight with anyone except to defend me in elementary school." "That was a long time ago." Again, he met her gaze until Wyatt Colburn came beside her. Sandy stepped away from her brother and closer to her fiancé. "My brother was my hero then, just as your Calliope's now. Glad you're okay." With his key, Michael let the car flash its lights and held up his hand to point toward her. "Let's get going." "Okay." Calliope waved, but Sandy reached out and hugged her. Wyatt shook her hand. A few seconds later, she was with Michael, and he placed his hand on her back to guide her toward his car. When he opened it, and she slipped inside, she felt a jolt of energy she hadn't felt since she was with him in Mexico. A second later, Michael took the driver's side seat and started the car. The second he drove away, he asked, "So why did you go back to Chris?" "I'll answer when we get home." Her entire body felt hot as she avoided his gaze. He must not have believed her that Chris was always the stand-in for Michael. She had to figure out how to make him believe her, and she needed time to figure out how. Silence came between them as she watched the palm trees float past the window. He held onto the steering wheel as he said, "I'll take you home." "No, I want to go to your home tonight." She reached out and touched his arm. "Okay?" He nodded and then drove toward Sunny Isles. As they crossed the bridge a few minutes later, she felt her heart began to pound. He handed his car keys to a valet and led her inside. A doorman called the elevator for them, and he placed his hand on her back. Her lips ached for a kiss, but instead goosebumps grew on her arm and entire body as they waited for the ride. Finally, the elevator's doors opened, and he led her to the door of his place. The tingling sensation grew in her lips as he closed the door behind him, and they were alone. She hugged her waist as he placed his keys on a table and said, "Here we are. Do you want a drink?" She placed her small wallet next to his keys and listened to the thump in her chest. "Okay, thanks." He walked away, and she watched his backside and strong shoulders as she told herself to relax. Everything was fine, and this time it wasn't a lie. A few seconds later, while in the kitchen, he held up the wine and a beer bottle. She pointed toward the wine, and then she heard him clink glasses and pour. Be brave, she told herself, and slipped her shoes off, leaving them near the door. With her head up, she walked on the cold marble floors toward the couch. He joined her, though he stared at her feet for a moment, and then handed her the white wine. As she wrapped her fingers around the stem of the glass, he asked, "Why did you take Chris back?" She clutched the stem harder as she looked at his chest. "Can't leave the question alone." "No." "Fair enough." She glanced higher and met his piercing blue eyes. Then she scooted 1 foot higher and placed it under her as she said, "My parents." His eyebrows narrowed. "I don't understand." She lifted her other leg onto the couch and hugged it as she squeezed her body together. "My parents loved each other and loved my brother and me." He reached out and stroked her shoulders. She relaxed them as he said, "Calliope, your parents died your senior year of high school." The pendant around her neck felt like it glowed from a memory as she nodded. "I know." "So how do they relate to Chris?" She lowered her leg. "He was with me when I found out. He's been all I had." "Calliope, your parents would want you to have someone who treated you better." Her brother had repeatedly said the same thing. Her head spun. "I don't know." Then he reached out and touched her neck as he picked up her necklace. "The pendant you wear. My sister has one just like it from our mother." Michael understood then. Chris had demanded she not wear it anymore last year. She nodded. "This was my mother's. Look, I don't know what it's like to have 2 parents who loved so freely, but I know you should be treated better than Chris treated you." As he let her necklace go, she reached out for his hand as she said, "Michael, I'm sorry." He blinked. "For what?" "For believing for even a second that Eva's baby was yours." His cheeks turned slightly red as he let out a small laugh. "It's fine. I'm used to no one believing in me." This was it. Nothing stood between them now. He could be her happily ever after. "I believe in you. Now kiss me." As his lips met hers, the troubles of the day melted away. His kiss, like the rest of him, was perfect. Chapter 12. Michael's hands traced Calliope's neck, breasts, and stomach as he kissed her. Her body burned and her gold dress felt heavy and in the way. Inside, the embers of a fire began as he touched her, and all she wanted to do was give herself. He stood and offered his hand. Without any other thought, she followed him into his bedroom. The walls were stark white with little decoration, though the black and white photography that hung was likely a decorator's vision of the closed-off Michael that he presented to the world. As they neared the bed, his lips met hers again, and it felt like her temperature shot through the roof. Nothing else mattered as his hands unzipped her dress and he trailed his lips down her neck. The powerful kiss sent shockwaves through her while he lowered his goal to the tip of her breasts and his hand played with her hem. Fireworks exploded as she let him taste every inch of her. Slowly, he freed her nipples from the restraints of her clothes and suckled one while he massaged the other. Wow! Excitement built inside her. He kissed her lips again while he explored and continued to tease her everywhere. Her body felt weak and she reached out to hold him as she lowered herself on the bed. Something needed to keep her steady. He held her close and deepened the kiss as he unzipped the dress fully and traced her spine. The sensation made her weak and needier. As she let out a soft sigh, he sucked on her nipples as she wiggled and was lost in a haze of desire. This time, while he kissed her again, she wiggled her dress lower. She helped, and when she kissed him, threw her dress onto the floor. It was in the way. The same with her underwear. Now she was naked and reached for the buttons of his shirt and top of the pants. She climbed on top of him to remove all his clothes and grinded on his hard manhood. Once she had his clothes undone, he slowed her down and continued his passionate attention to her breasts. A moan escaped her lips, and he broke contact to remove the vestiges of his clothes. She felt needy and ached for him. Finally, he returned to their intimate embrace, and he laid her down on her back while his kisses continued all over. first to her stomach, and she sucked in her breath while he went even further down. As he kissed the juncture of her thighs, she moaned out, "Michael." She heard a purr from him, but then he gently tugged apart the front folds of her nether regions and tasted her essence. Everything he did sent a wave of pleasure through her. She lost the ability to think. He was amazing, and she needed to do something more to ensure he enjoyed every second as well. She reached out and massaged his arousal. Somehow she had to give him as much pleasure as she could. To offer, she reached down to kiss the tip of his erection, but he shook his head and gently directed her to lie down. This time she obeyed and followed his lead. She traced his muscular body and opened her legs to keep him close as his massive penis pushed into her. The rhythm he found so fast sent her off the charts. All she could do was moan, "Michael, yes." Her pleas caused him to grin and show off his dimples. Then, while keeping the steady pace of their union, the palms of his hands stroked her alerted and needy skin until he flicked her nipples. The sensation caused her to moan louder. No other thoughts would form as he pumped faster. Clouds formed in her head, and she clutched his hands to hold him and herself in the here and now. Every part of her wanted to explode. They both needed this release at the same time. She had to offer him something that sent him into orbit as well with her, now. So she changed their positions and she climbed on top. He didn't object and stared at her like she was some angel. The light in his eyes inspired her. She found a pace that matched his as she bounced, and then leaned down to kiss him passionately. Finally, he let out a groan, and she knew that he enjoyed this. She swallowed and increased her speed as she rode his shaft and trailed her fingers over his hard body. He let out a grunt. "Good." He grabbed her hips and pumped faster. She met his speed as she lost control of herself. All she had were sensations and moans. Somehow he had the fortitude as he leaned up and took her nipple in his lips again. It was the last thing she could remember as her body went out of control, a funnel of need and want. He turned them again as he laid her on her back and continued his fast rate. All she could do was respond and take more of him in. Her entire body moved to his rhythm. She moaned as he possessed her body, again and again. Michael had brought her to heaven itself. She felt herself leave her body. Chapter 13. Sunlight beamed through the window. Calliope's body had muscles that ached in places she hadn't felt in years, if not ever before. Chris had been her only until Michael, and the sweet aches made her wish for more of Michael she'd already had as she sat up in bed. The imprint in the bed where Michael had slept felt cold as she traced his spot, but the blue ocean outside his window was clear and bright. She sighed as she hugged the sheets closer to her face. Then the door opened, and she turned her attention toward it and waited for Michael. He widened the opening, and she saw how he leaned against the frame in white soft cotton night pants. A yearning for more grew again as he simply said, "Did you sleep well?" A little talk might be good, though. Part of her screamed to help him remove his clothes and have another go. Right now she wanted more from him, and so she pretended to yawn. "What time is it?" 11 o'clock. She tugged the sheet tighter as her eyes widened. "No wonder it's so bright. I never sleep this late." He came to the bed and sat on the edge. Then he winked. "I had you up late last night." True. Her entire body still felt like she was in the clouds, but then the air around her grew with a familiar scent that wasn't pine trees and home. She sniffed to be sure as she asked, "Is that coffee?" He nodded like he'd earned a Christmas present as he held out his hand. "Yes, I bought it from the shop where I used to see you a lot in high school. But you only get it if you go to the kitchen table. My brother or Chris always ended up dragging me out of that place where we used to talk." She took his hand to help her stand. The moment she was naked, his gaze traveled over her chest and he nodded with appreciation. "Give me a minute." Then he walked away and opened his walk-in closet. "My t-shirts are in the top drawer." He pointed to a dresser in the closet he opened. "Gym clothes are on the top shelf here." She trailed behind him, and the moment she was set to pass him, he wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her in for another kiss. Her pores felt like she melted from his touch. It felt like she was made for him. Then he let her go, and all she longed for was to stay in his embrace. As he walked away, he said, "Hurry." She grabbed his college University of Florida jersey and threw it overhead. Then she went into his bathroom and saw a new toothbrush still in the pack on the vanity. She unwrapped it as she cleaned herself up. The sooner she finished, the sooner she saw him again. As she walked out in his jersey, she was drawn into the kitchen as the smell of coffee pulled her closer. He sat at a table that overlooked the Atlantic Ocean and took a sip of the delicious coffee in a white porcelain cup. The logo on the coffee container brought back memories of how she spent hours every day laughing with Michael. Her crush on him should have been obvious to her, even then. No wonder Chris always complained. Her own blindness to what she wanted seemed so silly now. Ocean waves rolled in the distance and brought her back to the here and now. The white and granite table and white dishes let the natural beauty of the ocean shine unencumbered. As Michael joined her from the kitchen, she tilted her head. "Michael, you cooked?" A laugh escaped his lips. "Yeah, no. I ordered brunch and had it delivered from the coffee shop." Not any shop, the coffee shop where they first became close. She licked her lips and helped herself to a piece of toast that she began to butter. "So I had heard a ringing, guilty." His face wasn't even remotely red. Then she peered closer at him until he returned her gaze. Good. She put her food down and adjusted her seat. "So about last night," he put his food down and took her hand in his. "Yeah?" She let his hand go and ran her fingers up his chest and then turned his face to get a better look. No bruise was there. "I just wanted to know how your face was. I meant to check, but then we, made love." "Sex, sweetheart. It was good sex." "No." She dropped her hands and her shoulders slumped. "Michael, if we love each other, then it was more than sex." He sat backwards in his chair. "I shouldn't have said that to you. Last night he'd seemed so genuine." She swallowed. "So you don't love me?" He lowered his head and reached for her hands as he choked on his words at first. "I do. I love you and I want you. But I don't want you to ever regret, and I took advantage when you were vulnerable." She looked up and tried to understand him. She squeezed his hand and waited for him to meet her gaze. "What? You were engaged?" She scooted closer. Michael had to understand. She swallowed and then said, "To the wrong man, Michael. I knew I should have said no to Chris. I hesitated and wished that I hadn't said yes. I was so afraid of being alone that I almost let you go because I was still afraid and not trusting myself." His eyes widened, but she continued. "He had to know everything. But to be happy, I have to try to be different and put myself out there. Being with you showed me what going past my fears could be, and I'm so upset I settled. It was the stupidest thing I ever did. When I said I love you, it wasn't empty words. I was admitting something I absolutely feel and wanted to say out loud. I trust you with my heart and soul." He kissed her forehead. His tender lips made her heart beat in a steady and sure manner. All he had to do was trust. She waited. Then he let go of her hand. His entire attention focused on her as she traced her face and brushed her hair out of her eyes. "With you, I get everything I ever wanted. But I'm more scared to disappoint you than anything else in my entire life." All she could understand was his gaze and his muscular hand that soothed her. She parted her lips. "Why would you disappoint me? I've disappointed everyone in my life." This wasn't about her. She'd almost chosen the wrong guy, but he'd never had a choice when it came to his father. She had to choose her words carefully, so she thought about her tactic and lowered her lashes. "How about your sister, Sandy? She clearly loves you and is not disappointed in you. I've been trying to protect her from my worst side." Good. He had no story there. She dared to look at him again. "What worst side? You don't have one." "That's not true." Now she had to ask. She pressed her lips together for a moment and stared into his blue eyes. "You don't believe in yourself. Did you father call you a disappointment?" "Every day." "Jerk." She kept that opinion to herself as she squeezed his hand. Your father stole from people. He left you with a tarnished last name, and he did that all to himself. Did you ever help him? Absolutely not. Good. Then he had a chance if he'd let himself be happy. She squinted to block the sun as she asked, why not? I mean, he was your father. Because I hated him, especially how he treated my mother. Finally, he understood. She nodded, so don't let him haunt you. His face went white, like he saw a ghost. Then he stood suddenly and his chair scraped against the floor. Calliope, I have to go to a meeting. I'll take you home, but I'd like to have dinner with you. Time to let what she said sink in. She had to trust him. He loved her and she loved him. She stood but took her toast with her as she said, sounds great, but I'll get myself home on one condition. He froze like he was about to be in a lineup. What? She quickly swallowed her toast and then licked her lips. Once she was sure no crumbs were on her face, she said, that you kiss me a lot of times before we go and when you come and get me. Deal. He kissed her. Tonight, when he accepted the truth, then they had a shot at happily ever after. She could wait that long. Maybe. Chapter 14. At home, Calliope plugged in her cell phone when she glanced at the clock. Noon. There was something she was supposed to do this afternoon. She unzipped her dress from the previous night and made her way into the bedroom. Once there, she saw the bank statements she had placed on her desk. She threw her dress in the hamper to drop it off at the dry cleaners later. As she continued on her path toward the shower, she stopped and realized today was the vote for Michael's company. Her phone rang, interrupting her thought before she could start worrying. She glanced at her brother's number and then answered it. Brandon, hey, you need to get to this board meeting for Morgan Enterprises today. She hugged her stomach and stared out the window. Her bay view was nothing compared to Michael's oceanfront. She swayed and shook her head. I promised I wouldn't go. Chris wants to sabotage Michael's deal because you slept with him for revenge. That's not true. She dropped her arms and stood straight. He just told me on my way up. Get here, fast, on my way. Her heart raced. She had to help him. Then she raced through her house to dress and called a car to pick her up. As she pulled up to Morgan Enterprises, which wasn't that far from her home, she stood and ensured her business skirt had no wrinkles in it as she adjusted her sunglasses. Today she took money seriously, and it was time she exercised her seat on the board. She rolled her shoulders and made her way inside the front door. As she flung open the door to the professional building, she blinked as she took off her glasses. Where in the world did she go for this? She turned and walked toward the front desk. The receptionist referred her to the 42nd floor. Her feet clamored as her heels met the marble, and she swore she smelled Chris's aftershave. Her stomach flipped. He wasn't close, though. She went to the elevator and made her way to the offices. On the floor, she stopped at the receptionist and said, I'm here for the board meeting. I'm Calliope Campbell. The woman pushed her glasses off her face and stood to show her where to go. The posh building that overlooked downtown Miami smelled modern and new. The walls and furniture was spotless, though she knew this bank offices existed here for years. As she turned the corner, the receptionist pointed toward doors that must lead to a conference room as they both walked. How strange. Both you and your brother decided to come today. The woman opened the door as Calliope asked, Brandon's here? Then she pointed toward the double doors that led to a conference room. A few people milled around outside it. The girl nodded. Yes, ma'am. I'm sure Mr. Morgan will be pleased his board of directors came today. Thanks. She waved, and without thinking she bounced closer to Brandon as she thought about Michael. The second she opened the door, the ocean breeze cologne that Chris wore filled her lungs. She coughed and then gazed right at him. For years, she'd denied what her brother warned, and now she realized Chris had used her money because he'd rather steal from her than let his family know about his lifestyle. None of that should matter, but she kept her nose high and walked closer to her brother. As she neared Brandon, he told her, "Calliope, please take your voting placard from Chris. He thought he'd pick it up for you." Chris followed her and handed her a name card as he said, "You haven't come to meeting ever. I've changed." She took the paper and returned to her brother, who held out a seat for her. She nodded as she joined him. "Brandon, how did you find out?" He pushed her chair in as Peter Morgan and his brother John walked into the room. "Peter told me." She ensured her skirt was smooth and scooted her chair toward the conference table. Out loud, Chris had no right to hear that her brother called. Her brother placed a paper, a folder with Michael Marshall's name attached, and a pen in front of her. "Glad you're here." Peter Morgan placed his hand on the table the second he sat and started the meeting. "Now we're going to vote on funding Michael Marshall's investment firm according to the contract we drafted." Chris flipped open the folder and held up his hand. "There are things in this contract we as a board would like to discuss." She flipped her folder open fast and glanced at the title. This was about the financial investment in Marshall Investments. She met Brandon's gaze, took a breath, and she raised her hand. Peter stared at her and she said, "I'd like to vote in favor of the contract now." "Don't be hasty," Chris stated. "Business is best if we discuss it." She picked up the pen and clutched it while she then stared straight through her former fiancé. "Chris, your hesitation isn't about business and everyone here knows it." Chris leaned forward. "He did hit me at the party last night, Calliope." Her forehead heated and she felt it tick while a few of the people near Chris all dropped their heads to avoid her gaze. No. She was done making excuses and letting Chris create a fiction where he was the victim. She leaned forward and her face felt hot. "You left me at the altar, impregnated 2 women, and then insulted me at the party. If anyone was out of line last night, it was you." The men near Chris glared at him. Brandon elbowed her and asked under his breath, "2 women?" With a nod, she simply said, "You missed quite a party, Brandon." Chris crossed his arms and then unfolded them as he pointed toward the folder. "Calliope, your need for revenge against me doesn't fit with the paperwork." Her legs shook, and it was a good thing she wasn't standing. Her brother's presence was a comfort, and his nearness helped her breathe easier as she said, "Chris, your jealousy has no place in a boardroom." Brandon then added, "I think we should call for a vote and approve the contract without any further discussion." She craned her neck and broke all eye contact with Chris as she asked, "Already?" He nodded and said under his breath, "Sis, you made your point." "I second the call," Peter said. He sat back in his chair and asked, "All those in favor of supporting Michael Marshall's company at the agreed-upon structure, say aye." Most of the room made noise, Peter said. "All those in favor, say nay." Chris was the lone voice of dissension. She turned and glared at him while Peter wrote on a piece of paper. "The ayes have it." Brandon then added, "Second point, not on the minutes, but we should discuss restructuring the board and removing Chris Sommers from any position." "What?" She sat farther back in her seat. John Morgan, the guy next to Peter, cracked a smile as he said, "I second that." Chris said, "You would." The other men and women in the room all murmured. Peter said, "All those in favor, aye." The room called out all at once. John Morgan stood and went to the door as Peter said, "It seems to be unanimous." John spoke to someone outside the door. "Security, please have Mr. Sommers removed." Calliope sat again as Chris stood with guards behind him to force him to leave. She recognized a few of the people in the room but she had no idea who most of them were, but she was happy to have their support. She paid half the attention she had before while the adrenaline in her veins pumped, but she listened enough to vote on the other concerns in the meeting. A half an hour later, the meeting was concluded. She put her pen down, and as she stood, she straightened her skirt. Her brother shook hands with the Morgans, so she joined him and shook hands of the group as well. Peter Morgan said, "Thanks for coming." "No problem." She heard Michael's voice in her head that she should stay away. She blinked and shook his brother's hand. Her brother held open the door for her, and she walked out with the crowd of others. While they made it to the elevator, she said, "Brandon, now that this is over, I should go home too." The elevator doors opened as he said, "First, let's grab a coffee. I want to talk to you." Michael had said tonight he'd absolutely hear about this meeting. She pressed her lips together and prayed he'd understand. The moment the doors opened, she followed her brother into the nearby coffee shop and ordered a cinnamon latte. As they grabbed their drinks and sat at a nearby table, she told her brother, "Okay, what?" He sipped his drink and stared at her for a second. Then he put it down and asked, "How involved with Michael are you?" She almost choked on her small sip. She swallowed and put her cup down. Then she stared at the lid as she kept her hands around the cup. "I love him. He loves me. I'm happy." "That's fast." She glanced up. Her brother had never interfered with her choices. She shrugged, picked up her cup and said, "But I'm sure. I denied my heart for years and settled for Chris. I don't want to do that anymore." He reached out for her hand and then said, "It's your life, so I'll stay out. However, I do have to say I like him better, but I will kill him if he hurts you." She tilted her head. Her brother had the look of a heartbreaker. Perhaps he was too good-looking for his own good, but then again, so had been their father. She sipped her latte and then said, "Brandon, one day you'll find someone special." He drank his black coffee and then placed the cup on the table. "What did you mean earlier when you said 2 women are pregnant?" Her brother and Eva ran in the same circles professionally. She hedged and then reminded herself she trusted him. She still lowered her gaze as she said, "Chris slept with Eva and she's having his baby too. He tried to let me think it was Michael's at the party." Her brother cracked his knuckles on the table. "I'm glad Michael hit him. If I had been there, I'd have helped him." Michael had done enough. She finished her latte, stood, hugged her brother and said, "Michael has been a rock in my life, much like you. One day I'll support the lucky woman you bring home to be my sister-in-law." Now she had to convince Michael that he deserved to be trusted and that she had come to this meeting to help him. Chapter 15. Calliope rushed to zip her white knee-length cotton dress for tonight's dinner. She wanted to look sweet and innocent for when Michael arrived. She finished as there was a knock on the door. She hadn't found her shoes yet, so she trampled to the front door in her bare feet. She froze as she saw the frown on Michael's face. Then her hand went to her chest and she opened the door wider to invite him in. He nodded and said, "Calliope." His frown expressed that he knew. Her heart went still and prayed she could explain. As he passed her, she hoped she was wrong and pasted a smile on her face. "Michael, you're early." As she closed the door behind him, ice felt like it raced up her spine as he said, "I heard what you did today." "Explain." Her face felt hot as she stared at his black leather shoes. "You heard Chris was there." He came closer. She didn't move, but she looked up as he said, "You said you weren't going to interfere." The promise had been made before she knew it. Had been Chris and her fault, he might not get the deal he wanted. She reached out for Michael, but he stepped back. She hugged herself. "So you want to let Chris Sommers, who hates you, decide the fate of your future because you don't want me involved?" He reached out for her hand as his eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" With an intake of breath, she realized he hadn't known who opposed him on the board. "Chris was the one behind the possibility that you might not get the funding. I couldn't let that happen. I'd not let him ruin you because of me." He squeezed her hand and then pointed toward the couch as he said, "You're going too fast. Explain." With his hand on her elbow, he led her to sit. At least he wasn't so grim. She sat but held his hands as she said, "He told Brandon he'd stop your company's future because you slept with me." "Calliope." She reached up and played with his jawline. "Michael, I love you, and I can't let your company dreams get ruined because of me. When Brandon called me and told me to join him, I ran over there." His face and entire body became stiff. She didn't move as she waited for whatever he'd say. Then his blue eyes became serious as he said, My dreams are nothing without you, Calliope." Her fingers curled around his neck. "So you forgive me." Then he kissed her and she forgot everything else. She closed her eyes and felt like the sun and all its rays were inside her soul, ready to shine to the world. As he let her go, she wasn't ready to open and instead curled into his lap and shoulder. He pushed her hair out of her face and gently massaged her as he said, "I was thinking a lot about what you said this morning." She finally opened her eyes and met his gaze. And he lowered his voice. "And you are right that the voice in my head that criticizes and makes me doubt myself is my father." Then she scooted off him, but turned to face him. "You are better than he let you believe. I know. I spent my entire life proving him wrong, and I don't want to lose you because I listened to his ghost tell me how I wasn't good enough." Wow. The wind that blew the palm trees in the distance. Michael's shoulders were rigid, and she wished to comfort him. She reached out and pressed her hand on his shoulder. "You are good enough to do anything you want." Without a word, he placed his hand on hers as she held him. He stared at her for countless seconds and she held herself together and waited. "Then I want you to marry me." Her heart raced. "What?" He squeezed her hands but then stood. She sat on the couch as he said, "Look, I saw you in a wedding dress already, but I don't believe in superstition about the groom seeing the bride in her gown. I want you to be mine forever." Until now, she hadn't pictured getting married, not even when she almost did. She couldn't move as she said, "Are you sure? Here." He dropped to one knee and pulled out a box. She pointed to it as he gazed up at her. "What's this?" "Patience." He winked and then he opened the box as he said, "This was my grandmother's ring. Before my mother died, she made me promise I'd only ask a woman I was sure loved me and that I wanted to build a life with. Calliope, I thought I lost you once. I won't let that happen again. Will you marry me?" Oh my goodness. Ripples of excitement had shot through her, but she had held still until he finished talking. This was exactly what she wanted and needed. She reached out and pulled him into her with a hug as she kissed his forehead and cheeks and lips. He kissed her but then stopped as he asked, "What does that mean?" She blinked and saw he still held the ring. She let out a happy sigh and said, "Yes, Michael, I love you. I love you too." He slipped the diamond ring on her finger. This time she'd say yes and mean every syllable. As he kissed her, she knew this was her happy ever after. Thank you for reading. I hope you loved Calliope and Michael's romance. The next story is the pregnant bad girl with a heart of gold, Eva Bishop, as she pretends to be Brandon Campbell's in Favorite Scandal. Or head over to my new series starting with Rocking Player to follow 6 sisters as they fall in love. And to find out about new books, sign up for my newsletter, https://victoriapinder.com. Also by Victoria Pinder. The Marshall Family Saga. Favorite Crush. Favorite Mistake. Favorite Sin. Favorite Scandal. The Steel Series. Rocking Player. Ruthless Financier. Wicked Cowboy. Powerful Prince. Cocky MD Scottish Seducer. Legendary Rock Star. Charming Boyfriend. Fierce Fighter. Treasured Guardian. French Doctor. The House of Morgan. Secret Crush. Secret Bet. Secret Wish. Secret Dad. Secret Heir. Secret Tryst. Secret Date. Secret Romeo. Secret Caress. Secret Bridesmaid. Secret Admirer. Secret Cowboy. Secret Mistress. Secret Cinderella. Secret Lover. Secret Tycoon. Secret Enemy. Visit victoriapinder.com for the complete list of books.